Good morning, everybody. I think a good amount of everybody that's signed up is here in attendance. Welcome to the latest Case Manager and Intake Procedures. This is the Core Features training class. That's going to cover new features for the new PHMIS version 4.0 release that's coming out. In the Core Features training, we're going to cover the basics associated with the HMIS system in regards to client intake, assessments, program-based processes. That's directed basically at case workers and case managers, intake personnel. This training does have a lot of information, and the whole release has a whole bunch of information. We tried to jam-pack as much as we could into the training, but what we've done is created a whole bunch of system feature guides that we're going to make available before the training that we're going to kind of show at the end of the training that has a bunch of information on each individual feature, and we definitely recommend everybody taking a look at them as well when the new system gets released. A little bit about the training. I know it's scheduled for 3 hours. We're probably going to keep you here a little bit longer. Try not to keep you here longer than 3.5 hours. We're going to have 3 breaks depending on how we are, where we're going along in the training. They'll be anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes so everybody can stretch their legs, rest their voice, that sort of thing. During the training, hopefully everybody's fairly familiar with WebEx, the toolbar and everything like that. You can go ahead and raise your hand if you want to go ahead and ask a question. During those breaks, we'll go ahead and have a little Q&A session. If during the training you want to go ahead and type in, ask us a question, we've got some people here that are, Dan and Steve here, ready to answer those questions. It's basically a little box utility. It's got a question mark on it. Go ahead and type it in. Please do, when you do send a question, to at least send it to the host or host and presenter so that everybody gets that question. Let's go ahead and get started. Here's a quick sample of all the features that have been included in the new system release. It includes a new client intake and assessment style data collection. We have enacted true global data sharing policies with flexible data element sharing settings. Along with that global data sharing, there's features that include client imports, data element downloads, global data sheets. We've updated the program side of the system to be process-based for enrollments, exits, interim assessments. We've got built-in duplicate client checking features that can automatically merge or flag clients as duplicates. And basically all the new features that we have in the system, whether it's program-based inventory, referrals, waitlist, are all programmed to allow for household-based processes, and there's a lot more. Training classes this week being provided this week, as well as we have classes scheduled for the end of next week, Thursday and Friday, that are core and supplemental feature classes. They are cumulative. We are holding another supplemental training class this afternoon, which will be like bed inventory, referral, waitlist type things. The agency manager classes are scheduled for tomorrow morning and Thursday morning. Please visit our website, www.newpa.com/PHMIS for additional training information. Register for those classes. The HMIS system release is scheduled for December 12th, 2012. Should be updated and online that afternoon, and pretty much all the features that you're going to see here today will be included during that release. Some system data collection guidelines. HUD requires the use of an HMIS system or compatible database for data collection of all ESG, COC, SHP, and Shelter Plus Care programs, as well as other state and federally funded homeless programs. HMIS system does now support data collection for victims of domestic violence. We'll talk about that throughout the training. However, any victim service provider, as defined by VAWA, whose primary mission is to provide services of victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, are still prohibited from entering their client data into HMIS system per applicable federal laws. As you can see here, here's kind of the jam-packed core features class agenda. We'll kind of go over the domestic violence features, security protocols, new intake methodology. Another big one's introduction to assessments, basically replace the old program-specific data element way of doing things. New client consent forms for sharing, as well as we have a whole bunch of new client management tools such as a global data sheet and the duplicate client checking that we'll go over. The start page, when case managers, intake workers log in. This is basically the screen that they will see. It's kind of like their home page with a whole bunch of features on it. Still got your gold action menu, still got your caseload, programs and sites, but as you see, which will mostly be covered in the supplemental feature, we've got referrals and waitlist sections, feature screens, as well as inventory. A couple global features. Before we continue on, the system does still have that log out feature. When you're done with the system, you do need to remember to hit the log out button located at the top, right above, top left-hand side of the system, above the action menu. When you are finished, failure to do so could result in being locked out of the system for up to 20 to 40 minutes. We have designed some extra system features to kind of scan those that are locked and have been out of the system to try to make that a little bit better. That's why it differs between 20 and 40 minutes. But if you do try to log in and you get a "you are logged in" message, that means your account is locked. You can do one of two things: wait for that 20 or 40-minute threshold, or if it's normal business hours, go ahead and contact myself or Steve. Give us a quick call or email. We can get you back in the system probably about 15, 20 seconds. It's not hard at all. Also, all required data elements are denoted with these gold balls throughout the system. Anytime you're going through a process and you see them, you will need to fill out those elements or pick the selections for those fields before the process can be completed or you can move on. Victims of domestic violence. The HMIS system has been updated to support the data collection for victims of domestic violence served at non-VAWA or non-victim service provider places, shelters. System has implemented provisions to allow for the rapid and mandatory identification of these clients, includes for those identified increased privacy measures to ensure their identities and personal information are only accessible by authorized personnel. Those clients that are tagged as domestic violence clients, when we say authorized, that's either you're an agency manager at the agency, you will have access to them, as well as, you know, if you're a case manager or intake worker, that client must be directly on your caseload. That's what we mean by the term authorized personnel. Every client entered in the system will need to complete an initial domestic violence assessment prior to creating a global data sharing policy. And we'll cover that during our assessment area as well. So new client intake methodology. While program enrollments were made tied to providing services to homeless persons, the system has evolved to allow the data collection of a wider spectrum of individuals. The system not only supports the entering of non-homeless persons into the system, but we highly recommend entering any person that your agency interviews or works with into the system. Even if your agency does not directly provide a person with homeless services, it still recommends entering them into the system, create a profile, enter assessments for future tracking purposes, or even for collaborative referral or waitlist opportunities. The system, we've kind of, with a push toward more community-based collaboration, in the past the system was more centered around homeless programs and everything was about programs. We've kind of evolve the system to allow for more data collection surrounding just the client itself, and that's kind of where we've moved with these assessments. And with that, we kind of had to evolve the system, especially on the client profile, to allow for partial collection of data for purposes that include outreach tracking, collaborative referrals, eventual eligibility and determination. Now, permission to enter client data in PHMIS is implied and requires no written or verbal consent. However, each partner agency is required to create and maintain a privacy policy that includes that organization's storage, usage, and intent of all client data collected, which includes information entered into the system. Now, while a client consent form is required to be reviewed and signed by all clients prior to enacting a global data sharing policy, it is not necessary to enter a client into the system, and allows for a number of data collection options prior to that point. That's why we now, as you'll see, allow partial collection of the profile and allow assessment style information such as health, income, benefits outside of a program that you can just simply attach to the client. Now, data sharing policy is required for every client prior to enrolling them into a program, which of course then requires an accompanying client consent form. Finally, all agencies are required to post a privacy notice that includes the reason for data collection and additional data sharing or collection rules, such as like implied consent to put their data into the system. And we just wanted everybody to know about these general rules, and we'll cover this in more detail during the actual agency manager class. The new entry tool, going to kind of go over putting a new client into the system and all the features that surround that. We do still have the single client creation tool called New Client, highlighted on the action menu. It is the single point for entering a new client in your system or into your agency. However, prior to entering a new client, the system still requires a search lookup to be performed to ensure no duplicates exist within your agency. Once you click on that selection, it basically brings up a search grid that basically breaks up the different identifying fields, social security number, last name, first name, that sort of thing. We do recommend putting in as much information as you have about the client as possible. Greatly reduces the system bringing up multiple choices. And also, we think that doing a simple search before you put a new client in the agency will greatly reduce additional data entry when you find out that there's duplicates and you have to deal with them, as well as being able to reuse clients that are already there. With the system as it was restructured about 8 or 9 months ago, only one client profile per agency is needed for proper data collection. Basically, once that profile is in your agency, all personal information, assessments, program enrollments, all are collected and added to this single client profile. Now, when doing searches, we have a couple different pieces of information that could come up. Basically, it's an agency search results, and now with the introduction of the true global data sharing, you could find global search results as well. If any agency search results are found, and those are actually client profiles that are directly within your agency that you've entered in and are accessible by you, they'll be in this first grid here and the familiar gray record to see if there's any matches there. Now, if you do find an agency match, if any do come up, we do definitely recommend for you to take a look at it, see if that's the person you're actually looking for, and if it is, to reuse that client profile, update any new information, and go on your way with whatever data collection process that may be. Now, the new part of the system with the global sharing, the system during a lookup will simultaneously perform both an interagency search as well as a full system-wide search and return any global client matches that it finds down here in the global search results. Now, as you see here, it has pretty much a lot of the same information, but it will be kind of highlighted in this powder blue, and basically it'll show any clients that have shared data throughout the system. Now, if you've had agency clients that have shared data, they'll probably also show up there as well, but it'll also show, clients that have visited other agencies as well. Now, with a quick note here with the global search, since it's searching the entire agency, it's important to know that if you do really generalized searches, like just put in the last name of, as you see on the slide, like Smith or John Smith, that could bring back a whole lot of global searches, especially if it's something really generic. So we do recommend to limit those global searches to try to put in as much information you have about the client as possible. Now, to find some more information about the global searches, if you're trying to put in a new client, you go, well, the agency guys aren't the people that I'm looking for, but you look at the global searches, you say, hey, well, that guy could possibly be the person that I'm serving and everything. You can click on the global profile, and the system will actually bring up a big read-only profile, as you see here. Kind of hard to see in the slide form. It looks a little better on in the system screen. And it could show some, all, partial information, and it's basically all the information this client has shared throughout the system, and they could be pieced together from a single agency in the system, or it could be put together from 4 different agencies depending on how many the client has visited. And it can basically, you can kind of take a look at this and deem whether this is the client that you're actually looking for to put in your agency. Now, also down at the bottom, we have a feature called Import Client to Agency that basically allows you, if that's the client you're looking for, to actually import this information into your agency and create a brand new client profile. Now, we'll kind of visit that a little bit after we talk about the new client entry process and kind of come back to this. Now, depending on your search results, which may or may not return anything, the system will provide for the ability to create a brand new client by enabling what we call, the create new client button, and that's pretty similar to the old system. Now, when you are performing a client lookup and search, it is recommended to always kind of go by a system. Always try to look for agency profiles first. If there aren't any found, then you want to go to the global ones second. They're kind of meant as a supplement to your agency level information. So once you actually click on the Create New Client, actually before we get into that, just one little note, the Client Lookup tool that's also available that can provide just general searches for it. Basically that and the new client tool basically provide the same information. You can use either one. Both of them will provide lookups as well as provide the new client, create new client button, so they're very interchangeable, which one that you want to use. All right, since the system now allows for entry of all clients, not just homeless clients, as well as partial client intake, the overall requirements for creating a client, as we said before, have been greatly reduced. During client creation process, there are only 2 required data elements for creating a client profile. Basically, all you need is the client's name and the agency, the client's agency, basically what agency they're going to go into. And that's all that's needed to create an initial client. Now, while all the universal profile data elements, the main information about them like gender, social security number, date of birth, are required to be collected prior to program enrollment, the system allows for the entry of the partial client data until full assessments or as you collect data or, until you know what you're going to do with them, whether it's a referral or actually a program enrollment. Once you actually click the Create New Client button, the system basically will load a template, kind of a blank template of our client profile that basically brings in a whole bunch of, it's got a bunch of personalized information about the client, and it's broken up into 4 basic areas: client information, physical characteristics, contact information, and then also called additional client information. And couple things we've done about this is the requirements, only needing to select an agency and putting in a name. Now, of course, we always recommend, if you have more information, to definitely put it in. It helps with duplicate client checking. We've kind of regrouped this top section up here a little bit to kind of put the most important data collection elements kind of at the forefront. Because as you see here, it's basically got name, date of birth, social security number. Those are the first 3 things it kind of collects right off the bat. Now what we're going to do is kind of quickly take you through each of these 4 sections. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. It's pretty straightforward. You ask the client for the piece of data, and you pretty much either type it into an empty text field, or you select from predefined selection list. The agency here, you select. Usually most intake workers, case managers, are associated to one agency, so they'll have one default selection. You enter in basically the name. Now the date of birth and social security number, they do have a little bit of configuration there. With these selective values, basically it's called data quality type. That also needs to be selected when you enter in a date of birth or social security number, because the system does allow for the collection of partial information. Now, if you have the full date of birth or full social security number, basically that's the selection you want, and the system will expect, the full information to be put in. But if you have a partial date of birth, approximate date of birth, make sure you select it, as well as a partial social security number. Make sure you select that as well. Physical characteristics, pretty straightforward, holds, height, eye color, and then ethnicity, race, and gender. Pretty much you just select them from the HUD-defined, predefined list on the screen. Additional client information, this is kind of, I guess what we call kind of the hodgepodge of information. We kind of put a bunch of different information into this section. Includes maiden name. It's got some state ID fields, primary language. Then it also has what we call the current housing status, as well as the veteran status is down at the bottom here. Now, just a note about veteran status, if you select no, that's all that's going to be prompted there. However, we've also now placed the actual military history collection, which basically collects information about veterans' service areas, particular information about their military stay. So if you do select yes with veteran status, the system will actually open up basically a screen for the military history to fill it in and collect that information there. Contact information. This is the final client profile screen. It's not required to be entered, but with the advent of global data sharing and the shift of the system becoming more of a client management system, we do require capturing as much information about the client as possible. Because we've had people in the past kind of say, well, why are we collecting contact information? Well, in the past it wasn't so as important as it is now, especially since information is going to be broadcasted everywhere. So, you know, always providing as much information as possible, especially, like I said before, with the case management, if you have the address or phone number or email address of clients so you can, you know, talk to them for additional contacts or assessments and everything. It's basically broken up into 3 different sections. You have the address section, which is made up of street, city, state, and zip, the phone numbers, and then the email that needs to be verified. Each 3 of these sections are independent of each other so that they can be collected as you receive the information. So if you just have a phone number, you can just put it in, save it. If you just have an email address, put it in. Kind of as you collect information, you should basically put it in the system into this area, into this section. The import, as we talked about earlier with the global import, that when selected begins actually the new client entry process and basically copies all client global data that they've shared throughout the system directly into the new client screen. So if you do notice a global profile that says, hey, that looks like the guy. He hasn't been at my agency, but he must have been somewhere, you know, at another agency in the system. This option can definitely reduce data entry. You don't have to refill in all the information, as well as it can help with accuracy. You know, if it's already been collected and verified somewhere else, it's a pretty good starting point for creating the new client profile. Now, when you do a global client import, the system analyzes the imported data, and any client that has any data elements that are deemed what we call not 100% match across all contributing clients will display the following message. And any of those data elements that we see as not 100% match across the entire system will be highlighted here in yellow. Now, when we talk about not 100% match, basically how a global profile is created is agency clients, when they share their information, it kind of gets uploaded to kind of a global profile that matches like clients visiting different agencies altogether. Now, we use basically an algorithm to determine what's the best information for that client to broadcast down. Now, we kind of use a calculation of, you know, the most recent data collected, the most complete data collected, as well as kind of what we call a majorities rules, a majority rule kind of calculation to try to provide everybody with the best information from what's been sent up to the global profile. So any one of those that have conflicting information, so if one or more clients sent up information like with veteran status, some had yes, some had no, that's when we're going to say, hey, we're not positive. Here's what the best answer we think it is. So any of those data elements that you do see like that, we just want you to be conscious of that to, you know, double check them to make sure that they're exactly what you want when you create the client profile. Now, once you're happy, whether creating an agency client or importing a global client profile, basically you just hit save, save and next on the bottom of the screen to complete the process. However, the system still does have duplicate client checking during the client creation stage. The system will check basically your agency. It'll go through, you know, whatever information you've entered, it'll go and try to find another match within your agency, and it can return with basically 2 different the matches, either a full match or what we call a possible match. If the system does find a full match, which is basically a name and a full 9-digit Social Security match, the system will basically flash this message on the screen, find with the Social Security number you enter already exists, and it'll automatically merge the 2 profiles. They'll basically take the existing one and the new information that you've entered in and kind of give you the best match of the data on the screen, and it allows you to kind of look over that information, hit save, and kind of saves you the trouble of going through any kind of duplicate checks later. Now, With the possible match, what the system basically does is it kind of does a matching of a name as well as either a date of birth or a gender match. We'll display what we call possible matches, and the system will basically kind of show you a little grid up at the top of the screen, because it could be 1, it could be 5 possible matches if there's, you know, generic information entered like John Smith or something like that. And it basically asks saying, hey, can you please, if this grid does come up, we do recommend you take a look at that grid, make sure, you know, that could be the person you're looking for. If that's the one you want, basically you click on them, and it'll basically take that client, put them on the screen, and do that client merge with all the data as well. However, if you look at it and you go, well, that's, I'm positive those aren't any of the clients that I need to create a brand new client, you basically just hit save again, and the system will create a new client in the system. DV privacy protection. Throughout the system, there's going to be a whole bunch of domestic violence client, privacy security protocols, because we basically need to protect this information from unauthorized users. Now, during this time, if the system finds either a full or a possible match, and one of those clients happens to be flagged as a victim of domestic violence, and you as a user aren't currently authorized to view that client, the system will do 2 different things depending on whether it's a full or a partial match. If it's a full match, the system will basically splash a message saying, hey, a client with that social security number that you entered does exist in the agency. However, it has restricted access due to privacy concerns. Please contact your agency manager to basically work on the issue. Kind of similar with the possible matches. As you can see here, this is basically like the possible match grid that comes up. If any one of those possible matches is a victim of domestic violence, and again, you don't have access to them, instead of showing their information, it'll basically show a line that says privacy protected with the client ID, and basically splash up this message here. Now, during the time, if any case manager or intake worker sees this, we definitely recommend that you go and talk to an agency manager to either have them take care of the problem, so give them the client name or the client ID so that they can look at it and see if they are a match or not, or place that client on your caseload so you can continue with that process. Okay, households. Now we're going to go into the actual households, and actually not a lot has changed with households. It's pretty much the same processes, so our existing users should be familiar with all this. All clients that are presenting as a group, which is 2 or more persons, regardless of the program, must be manually entered into a household. It's basically the way to group like clients presenting for services together for all programs in the system. We do recommend using a specific housing convention, like head of household, last name plus the word household. Basically make it easier for when you're searching for households later in the system, you have some keywords to use. Now, households can be configured in a couple ways. One is from the client profile, using what we call the household profile tool, or by using the system does have a number of standalone tools, like new household lookup that can be used as well, and we'll kind of cover each of them briefly in the next couple slides. This is the profile household tool that's available when the client is created, as well as it's always available on the profile as long as they're not in a household. I actually made that change about 6 or 8 months ago, and we're actually really glad that we did that, because a lot of people have used this very successfully. And it provides 1 of 3 options when you're creating a household, or creating a client, or basically you want to configure a household for a client. The none option is basically that. It means nothing's going to happen, and that's the default option. Nothing's going to happen with this person in a household. They're going to remain a single. If you want to create a new household on the fly and put this client in it, basically you select new. The basic system will kind of open up, provide fields for you to enter in. It requires basically for you to enter a household name, the new household name, as well as entering in the join date and the client's position in the household. The second one is if you know a household already exists and you just want to put that client in that household, you can select existing. And depending on what agency they're in, basically it'll dynamically build this household name list of all the households that currently exist. Basically, you select the one you want to add them to. Then again, you put in the join date, as well as you select the client's position in the household. Then basically when you hit save, bam, whatever configuration you added, the system will process. Now, using the standalone tools, we basically have a new household tool within the Gold Action menu. Basically, when you click on it, the first thing it'll do is it'll bring you here to a little household creation section where basically you select the agency the households are going to be associated to. Now, just as a reminder that the clients that are going to be put in this household need to be assigned to the same agency that the actual household is. And then you basically enter in the name of the household, whatever you want to name it, and then you hit save, and it's kind of a two-step process. Then that'll actually save the household, and then basically the system will open it up where you have the ability to add specifically previously created clients to this household. Now, I know we actually recommend using the client tool on the client profile. It's a lot easier, and you kind of do it one at a time, and we know a lot of people have switched to using that method. But this one is available as well, and you can kind of do mass client additions to the household. Basically how you do that is you've got this client little search for record area. You click on the magnifying glass, you type in the name of the client, the system will search and bring up the client results. You click on the client you want, it'll bring it down into this area. Then again, you basically select the position as well as the join date, and basically click the add button, and bam, the client's automatically added to the household. You basically can repeat this process for as many clients that, as many times for as many clients that need to be added to this household. A couple historic household features that we released back in, I believe, about August. Now, this basically provides for a way to historically track people that have been in a household but are no longer in that household. And we kind of had to come up with a scenario since households are kind of global and they kind of float around with the clients. We had some situations where, as an example, you had 4 people in a household that all went into a program stay. But then only 2 of those household members came back for a second program stay. We basically needed to provide a way for you guys, your agencies, to configure it so that the 4 people are in the household during the first stay, but then only show 2 people in the household for the second stay. And basically the way we've done that is we basically provided a way to report a household as what we call a leaver. So to do that, you basically select on them, hit the leave button, and the system basically will ask for a leave date. And basically, as you see here, you basically have a join and a leave date, and that's kind of like a time frame of which that client is going to be reported as being in that household. Now, we also have a delete, which basically you can use that if you accidentally put them in the household and they shouldn't have been in there, usually when a mistake was made, to get rid of them. Now, a couple notes since we kind of have the join date and the leave dates up here. Since we've enacted this historical household tracking, we've had to be a lot more, I guess, literal with how we look at these household dates, because the system basically needs to look at these household dates in conjunction with program entry and exit dates to determine, since pretty much all the reporting is heading toward household type thing, are they adult and children, adults only, children only households on the reports. That's why this is very important to be aware of these, especially the join dates, when you are enrolling clients into programs, to make sure that all the clients that are in the household during the program stay have the proper join dates. Just want to make sure everybody knows, be aware of that the system looks at that very literally for reporting. Now, once a client has been placed as a former or as a leaver, we call them former household members. When you view that household, you'll see the current members, which are currently in the household, and then the former members are people that were in the household, but only for a specific time range. We also allow options here, either restore and delete. Basically, a restore puts that person back in the household. If you went, oh, I put him as a leaver, but I messed up. He actually didn't leave the household. I need to put him back in. You can use the restore option. Or again, if that person should have never been in that household in the first place, we do allow a delete feature there as well. So a lot of flexibility with tracking households within the system. Another domestic violence victim note, keeping and ensuring the clients that are marked as victims of domestic violence are personally protected in the system. We have enacted measures from a household perspective as well, because there can be certain clients that are victims of domestic violence that have household members that may not be victims of domestic violence. While it might not all, be as happen as often in the real world, it could happen, so we had to program for it in the system. Anytime you come into any household grid, and there's a bunch of household grids through the system, whether on the client profile, whether actually doing a household lookup, seeing them there, when you're doing, since a lot of household processes throughout the system now prompt for household selections. Anytime a user is looking at a household grid and they don't have access to a specific client that is a domestic violence victim, you'll see this line that basically is a privacy protected line here. That means there's a client that's attached to that household, but that user does not have access for it. So be aware of that. And if you do come across that, you can bring it up with your agency manager. Tell them the household, the clients. They should be able to look into that situation and be able to deem what the best situation is, whether to put those clients on your caseload or whatever needs to be done. Okay, we've come to our first break here. It is about 10:09. Let's go ahead and let's take about a 10-minute break. What we're going to go ahead and do is, anybody has any questions, that wants to ask any questions, go ahead and raise your hand. On the toolbar there, the participants toolbar, we'll go ahead and unmute you and you can ask it. We'll also look into the questions and answers section to answer any questions that we have there. See you back at about 10:20. Thanks.
All right, we have a couple questions in here. I'm going to verbally answer them and try to kill two birds with one stone because we have two questions about the household tool. The first one is, if it says child, but if anyone comes back to the household at a later time, they leave the household and come back, what is their join date? The join date should always be the date they actually join the household. A client can be both a former household member and a current household member at the same time, as long as the dates they were in the household don't overlap. And the reason for that is so you can track correctly people moving in and out of households. So if someone left the household, you'd move them to the former household table, and then if they came back, you would re-add them to the current. The second question is about restoring a client. It's similar to the first question in that they left the household and came back. The restore button should be used to make correct mistakes. If you accidentally remove a person from a household and put them on the former member, but they never actually left, use the restore button to delete that historical record and put them back in the current household. If they legitimately left the household and then came back later, like I said the first time, just re-add them. Sue, no, that's not what I'm saying. The question is, I guess when I just spoke, I was misunderstood. The whole point of the household tool is so you can accurately track exactly every client's movement in and out of a household. So before, everyone was just treated as currently being part of a household or not. And what we found was we needed a way to track not only who was currently part of a household, but also who may have been part of the household before. So if a client is part of a household and you put in a leave date, but that leave date you come to realize was incorrect, maybe it's a data entry mistake or whatever the reason, you can use the restore button to remove that date and put them back in the current household, meaning that they've been in the household the entire time. However, if a person left the household for 6 months and then came back later, you wouldn't need to do anything with that historical record. You would just re-add them to the current. So you would actually have the client in the household twice. No, that's not what she asked. What is it saying? Yeah. Systems, possible match. I don't remember that. The answer to any question is just can you just ignore it? If
what did she
if you get a possible match.
When entering a client system.
Sorry, Emma, we're brainstorming.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, with the possible matches, since it's only kind of like the name, date of birth, and gender, it just basically provides you with a grid of saying, hey, are these any possible matches? If you can summarily ignore them, and just hit save again, and it'll create the new client. So it's basically just an intermediary step to say, hey, we've noticed these people. Are those people you're looking for? So it's kind of almost just a stopgap step to make sure that you're aware of these other maybe clients in your agency.
Wendy, no. The question is, when you add a client to the household, wouldn't you be creating a duplicate client? The answer is no. The client still remains the client. It's just that under the hood, you are enabling the system to track multiple, just like you can track multiple program stays, you can track multiple household stays. So you wouldn't actually be, you wouldn't need to create that client again. In fact, the system wouldn't let you. You would just re-enter them into the household. Hey, Sue, we'll address your household question after the training. There's a question here about domestic violence victims and protecting their information. The system protects the DV victim's information by collecting an assessment about whether the DV is currently fleeing a domestic violence situation. If they are, then the system automatically locks down not only data sharing, but the ability for other users at your agency to see that data if that person is not on the case list, your case list. So if the entire household is not fleeing domestic violence, which is not likely, but you are worried that that the other members of the household, that their information could potentially identify the domestic violence victim, then simply flag all household members as DV victims.
Okay, let's get back. Now we're going to cover some new features, global features, some navigation updates, as well as kind of go into the introduction of assessments, as well as the global data sharing setup. Any client that is tied to a global profile has the ability to receive global data update notifications sent from the system providing the latest data that has been collected and shared by other agencies. This feature can provide users and agencies with the ability to keep their client profile records updated with the latest and most accurate information compiled from multiple contributing agencies across the system. Basically, when you enter a client profile, and this client is globally linked to other clients across the agency, whether their information is shared or not, the system still does linking under the hood. You may see what we call, I guess, global data notifications throughout the global client profile, and these are only on the client profile. You may see these little green globes everywhere, and basically they could be assigned to every single field. We've got it broken down down to the very last data element in the system. These little global fields that basically are saying, hey, I've got some new data. You want to take a look or use it? All you have to do is basically click on this globe, and what it'll do is it'll basically, if it's a blank field, it'll fill it in with new information. Or if you have existing information, the system thinks it's got, hey, I've got newer stuff here. When you click on it, it'll basically update it with the newest information. Now, once you do click those globes, by clicking the green globes, as you can see here, it'll basically fill in or update information from the global profile that, using the basic algorithm that we talked about earlier, that the system believes is the best possible data that this client has given to other agencies throughout the entire system. Now, once you click on it, basically it kind of allows like a toggle system. So once you click it, it's not like done, that's it, that's the data you have. But once you click it, it'll kind of turn to like a little red X. As you can see there, it's kind of a small icon. And that basically means, hey, I've downloaded the data. Now, it allows you to basically click on it and kind of toggle back and forth to see what data you want. Now, the other feature that we have here is if you just hover your mouse cursor over the globe, what this system will do is it'll kind of pop up like almost a little tooltip that'll basically tell you, hey, this is the data that when you click on this globe that's going to be filled in. So you can kind of, instead of just blindly clicking it, you can hover over there and go, oh, well, that's the new data, and then you can almost compare it to the data on the screen if it's already filled in to decide, what do I think is the best data? Until you actually, click on the globe and actually hit a save button, that's when the system will actually add that information to your client profile. We think this is a really nice feature, another feature associated with these global profile updates, and basically another advantage of sharing data throughout the system, because when you're collecting data in your agency from the client, you could be summarily collecting data from some other agency that has seen that client as well. It's more of a community-based collection format. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some new system navigation kind of subsections, some neat little navigation that we've entered into the system. When you enter in the client profile, which is basically the first screen that you enter when you load a client, we have what we call these subsection tabs throughout the system that basically, when you click on each one, it provides different configuration information, different information about that specific client. As you see here, it's profile, assessments, data sharing. It's also a referrals waitlist tab that we'll talk about in the supplemental class. The system allows, at least within the profile and assessments, these navigation tabs. This is basically like the next button. And then there's also, when you're on the next tab, assessments that allow you to kind of navigate back and forth between these data tabs smoothly and easily. Now, within the assessments screen that we're going to actually show in a little bit, like when you click on assessments, as you'll see here, each of the individual assessments or formerly program-specific data elements has their own tab as well. And those tabs have these forward and next or next and previous buttons that basically allows for you to, enter data, hit next, enter data, hit next, and kind of move along the way. Now, within the profile and assessment screens, the system auto-saves data when using this navigation. So you can go to the profile, enter an address, hit save and next. It'll automatically save the data. Go to the next screen, you can enter data, hit next, and it kind of allows a nice, easy, smooth data entry process throughout the system. Now, also, when you're in these either top main sections or these bottom assessment sections, if you just jump to another subsection tab and select a button, the system also performs the auto-saving ability as well. Basically, it looks at it and compares, and it says, hey, has any data changed from when you went enter? If there isn't any new data, you quickly move on. If there is new data, it'll quickly save it. So we think this is pretty good feature to allow, a system of going through a client collecting all the information. Now, just a note about this auto-saving, it does save everywhere in the profile and assessments. The data sharing page does not auto-save. We felt that because this information is pretty important, we wanted to make sure that any data, any configuration changes that occurred, you specifically had to hit save on that page for it to be enacted within the system. Okay, now we're going to go on to assessments. One of the large changes that have occurred is the way in which program-specific data elements are collected and maintained in the system. The data elements that include health, education, employment, income, and benefits, as well as the new domestic violence status, have been placed into the forefront of the system in a new data collection methodology collectively known as assessments. As I said before, they collect the assessments have been placed in the client profile section of the system and have been designed to work seamlessly also with program data collection requirements like enrollments, exits, annual assessments. In addition to collecting and maintaining program-based information in the system, how in the past everything was all program record-based, we kind of talked about our new intake methodology. We're moving toward the ability to collect this data outside the program and kind of move toward a client-based data collection system. And any of these information, health, income collected outside the program is referred to collectively as a general assessment. Now, the ability to collect these general assessments have the potential to create a number of new applications and include, central intake environments, referral and collaboration processes, eligibility modules, and eventual customization of assessments based on, COC, local, regional data collection needs for reporting, planning initiatives. So by moving this way in the system, we think we've opened up a large array of new features and implementations by going this way. Now, in the past, all the assessments were placed in what we call the program-specific data elements. That kind of hated program-specific data element button is gone. Now, all assessments entered into the system, past, present, future, either collected, as a general one for the client or even with the program ones, and we'll kind of cover that a little more in the program section, are located within this section for each client. Now, as I said before, they're all located within the client profile section. Basically, assessment tab basically contains all 6 different assessment, what we call assessments, and within each assessment, they contain the data element groupings that make up that individual assessment. Now, we're going to go over a little bit about these general assessments. A user will be able to complete full client assessment that includes all or some of these program-specific data elements and enter that information into the system at any time and just attach it to the client. Now, please note that general assessments are not required. This is not anything that's required to be entered during client creation, and they're not required to be entered prior to program enrollments. However, they can be used to collect client data in a standalone fashion and can be used in conjunction with other system processes as explained below. The general assessments also allow for clients to be entered into the system regardless of needs and allows for the collection of this information. Say you want to you're doing central intake and you want to collect specific, employment information before you send on them a referral or add them to the wait list, you can do that. As well as if you're doing, like I said, central intakes or just collecting a person's need before you do eligibility determination to see whether he fits any of the eligibility to enter in any of your agency's programs or even any of your collaborative groups programs. So if you're entering the person into the system, but you know their needs already, and you're specifically saying, hey, I'm going to enroll this guy into the program, during programs, like when you do an enrollment and everything, the system will require the collection of some of these assessments. So we don't want you to do double entry. We don't want you to go in and fill out all the information just to get to the program and have to recollect it all again. So we just want to make sure everyone are aware that they do have special uses for these general assessments. Now, these general assessments do have the ability to be used in other system processes, such as program stays. We do allow the importing of these assessments if they are collected in a timely manner. And again, we'll cover that more during the program event section of the system. Like I said before, each subsection contains the data elements specific to that specific section. Those of our existing users that are familiar with the old system, none of the data elements have changed. They're basically the same HUD-defined data elements or data element groupings under each one. Basically, it's kind of a three-step process. You enter in whatever data elements are on the screen that you've collected from the client, whether it's health, education, employment. You do need to manually enter in the assessment date. That's very important. As you can see, each assessment has a little message here that once the assessment date is entered, that's the only thing that cannot be changed. We will show you how to go back and update an assessment that was entered, if you made a mistake or did something, but the date is the one thing that cannot be altered. And the date should be the day in which you actually collected the information from the client, not specifically the date that you entered it into the system. Just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. Once you've entered those two steps, basically you hit save, and the system, the data's been entered and associated to the client in the system. Now, each assessment is broken up into two separate sections. The top section always contains what we call the current assessment, while the bottom section contains what we call historic assessments. Now, the current assessment is always the most recent one collected, recent set of data collected. It could be, general-based. It could be program-based, based on the assessment date. It basically looks at the assessment date and says, hey, what's the latest set of data that, you've collected from the client? That's the one that'll be up there. Now, the historic one, which we're going to show a little bit in the next slide, in the past, this is really good for the health, education, employment, where in the old system for our existing users, there was just one screen of data. So there wasn't a lot of ability to do any kind of comparison or see any movements of services. Now, anytime you enter in any assessment, it gets saved. It may not be the current one, but it will get saved down here in the historic section. Now, as we see below, historic assessments, this is an example of the health ones, there could be one, there could be just one for an entry and one for an exit if their client's just there for a specific program stay. Or there could be 10 of them, if you've done, a combination of general ones or they're in multiple programs. They'll all be shown here, and all you have to do is click on them, and it'll basically show all the information collected within that assessment. So you can click on each one, and basically you can show kind of, like I said before, a progression of data collection in the system. So you can always go back and see what you've collected before that step. Now, the system basically has a couple options. Whenever you're viewing a collected assessment, whether it is a current or a historic that we've shown, everything always comes up in read-only fashion. So basically, as you see here, all the data elements are locked out. We kind of did that, so there's a definite difference between viewing and editing. We didn't want to accidentally have someone, click a, switch an answer, hit save, leave without knowing it. Everything in the system is kind of changed to a process-based thing where you have to start something to do something. Each current assessment will basically have two options, basically an update assessment or a new assessment. Now, the update option is basically when you click that, it'll basically unlock whatever assessment you're on, and all the data elements will become changeable. Of course, the date will not, as we explained below, that stays locked. So, if you made a mistake, if you associated the wrong information to the wrong client, you come in, hit update, make whatever changes you want. hit save again. These will become enabled, and that's basically the new information will be saved. Now, if you hit new for the current assessment, it's only available in the current assessment area, the system will basically clear out the screen and basically allow you, as we showed before, to enter a brand new assessment. You basically enter the assessment date, and then depending on the date, the system will look at it again and determine, you know, it could be another historic one you're collecting, or if it is the latest one, it'll become the new current. It's very dynamic with the things that it does there. With the history, it's very similar. It doesn't have the exact same features because you can't create a new historic assessment. You have to do that in the current one. It could be historic, but the system will have to wait until it sees the date to know where to kind of place it. Basically, as it shows a read-only fashion, you basically click the update button down there, and basically the system will basically unlock all the fields. You can make the changes once you hit save. All the information has these little last updated date fields that basically show the last time and date as well as the user that updated it. The whole system on the profile and assessments have these everywhere. I think it's pretty good, pretty informational. And then you basically hit save again, and you're basically done updating that process. Now, while general assessments, since they're associated to the client, they're available to be viewed and updated by every user at your agency. However, as with the program stuff, each user has specific permissions associated to them. They basically have program site combinations of what programs they specifically administer. So if it is a program-based assessment, not every user is going to have the ability to edit it. They can view it, every assessment's viewable, but only those users that have specific access to, say, this example, this downtown housing shelter program, will be able to update that assessment information. Just want to make sure everybody's aware of the permissions within the assessment area as well. Now to kind of talk a little bit, we kind of shown the processes, the new process of collecting. Now we kind of still have to go over how to collect this information just quickly. Health, education, employment, like I said before, have a single entry screen of data elements. Basically, the system walks you through the process. Health assessments must be collected at program entry, program exit, and annually. If the length of service is longer than 12 months. Now, education and employment are optional pretty much for all program types, but it may be required by your specific agency, COC, local authority, and it now can be collected, as we said, in historical terms. Now, when doing health, we moved the disabling condition question to the health assessment, kind of fits there, and also it has the basic 4 basic physical health questions that are yes or no. If you do answer yes to them, it will have a secondary question. Same thing with the mental health questions. If you do answer yes to it, affirmative, it will ask 2 follow-up questions to it that need to be answered. Now with the services and treatment condition, the questions will differ depending on what type of assessment it is. If it's an initial assessment, like a general or an entry, it'll basically ask 1 question about services. If it's a follow-up interim assessment or an exit, it'll ask another one. Pretty straightforward, just basically answer the questions that the system asks. The employment and education, employment data remains the same, and it can be collected for all clients that are age 14 and above. If they're not 14, they won't even have that tab on their client profile. The education is broken into 2 areas. Adult education is collected for anybody that is 18 and above, and that's basic post-high school, college, secondary schooling questions. And then children education data can be collected between people aged 5 and 17. It kind of involves high school, elementary, middle school type questions. Income and benefits must be collected at entry, exit, and annually for a lot of different program types. Now, an income source should not be assigned to more than 1 person in the same household. Basically, income gets assigned to just the person that either, actually earned the money or that had their, name on the check, if it's a benefit. Just 1 person should get each income source. Now, a benefit is kind of exact opposite. It should be assigned to all members of the household for which it actually assists. And that's got to be a judgment call on your side to see, oh, he's receiving, the family's receiving this benefit. Which of the household members are directly benefiting or assisting from that benefit? We use food stamps as a pretty good example. One person may actually sign up and buy the food and receive the food stamps, but since it's going to the entire family, you probably want to assign it to every household member. Now, income and benefits are a little bit different than the other ones because they could have multiple income benefit and source records that are recorded with each assessment. Because people could be receiving multiple benefits, as well as they could also be receiving multiple income sources. Because of this, we need to create a little bit of a different interface to collect this information to easily bundle multiple records together in a single assessment. We think it's fairly intuitive. It may take a second or two, a time or two to get used to it. But basically, income and benefits are exactly the same. So once you learn one, you'll get the other. The only difference is for income, of course, requires an income amount to be entered for those actual financial sources. And you have 3 steps here. Basically, you'll have the predefined drop-down list of either income or benefits, and basically you select the one the client has, and then you hit Add. And you basically do that as many times for as many sources as the client has, and then add the income amounts. In this example here, this specific client has 2 income sources. Once you're done adding and configuring the income sources or the benefit types, then you need to enter in the assessment date, pretty much the same rules when you collected the information. After that's done, you simply hit the Complete Assessment button, and that's it. That's how you create an income or benefit assessment and bundle multiple source records together in the same assessment. Now, with the updating or editing or viewing them, as you can see, they're like the other assessments. They're all in read-only format. But if a mistake was made and you want to basically update that information, it'll have an Update Assessment button. You basically click on that button, and what it will actually do here at that time is, and we'll show that on the next screen, is open up these records here to be able to configure them. Also, within the current income area, there'll basically be a new income or new benefit assessment button. If you want to do a new general, new general assessment, you click this button, it'll clear the screen, it'll be kind of blank and allow you to kind of enter in a brand new assessment. Now, once you do hit the update button, as you see here, it'll basically unlock any of the source records you have, as well as unlock the type area. The date will stay locked. And at this point in time, the system basically allows you to do anything you want. You can, click on a record, bring it down to this area and remove it if it was mistakenly added. You can add a new one if it was forgotten. Basically, if I switched assessments, I put, all the wrong assessments and switched it between 2 people. You can go in and basically clear it all out, switch the assessments around. Once you're done, you basically hit the Complete Assessment button. Boom, it gets resaved, gets relocked out. And this goes for both historic as well as current assessments, basically the same process. Now, one note with this income and benefits, they do require, existing ones, require at least one source to remain. So you can't go in here and clear out all the income sources and then hit complete. The system, since it's created, requires at least one. And we do have the familiar, say you do an assessment and the person either doesn't know or says, oh, I don't have any income or benefits. Within the selection list, we still have the no income or no benefits within the last 30 days, as well as the don't know, refuse selection that you can add, so at least you get your one record in to complete that specific assessment. Okay, with the domestic violence assessment, it's been newly added to the system, and it's kind of the main component of our support for domestic violence victims. And this is basically where you denote or designate clients are either, regular clients or they are domestic violence clients. And it's pretty, when you go into this tab, it basically provides a single question: is this client actively fleeing a domestic violence situation? And you basically have the 4 selections: no, yes, don't know, and refused. Now, any person that is not a DV client, you want to answer with no. You enter the date, you hit save, and you kind of go on your way. Now, for anybody that answers this question with a yes, a don't know, or refused, and saves, and it is their current assessment, the system will see that client as a victim of domestic violence and will enact the specific security protocols that we talked about, and only allows authorized users to view them. Also, we're going to talk about global data sharing up next. Even if a global data sharing policy is set and they have full sharing, or you know, they were broadcasting data out, as soon as a person's active DV status becomes either yes, don't know, or refuse, the system shuts off global data sharing and it pulls back any data that has been broadcast. Because since, you know, if we're only allowing authorized users within the agency to view them, of course we're not going to show any of their data throughout the system as well. Now, at any time during, you know, this client being in your agency, you know, they could be a DV victim, and then they could come back 6 months or a year later, and now they're no longer fleeing a situation. To change the status, you come in here, create a new domestic violence assessment, because there's both the current and the historic ones, select no, and then the system will actually revert back to a general client. So it basically flips these flags depending on what their current assessment is. We still have data element validation throughout the whole entire system. Helps reduce typos or ensure certain data element data collection processes that are started are necessarily completed. Now, in the client profile, it's kind of opened up to partial collection and everything. But for things like assessments, it doesn't allow partial assessments. You can't start it without finishing it. You can't just answer one of the health questions. That's still not allowed. It's also throughout the system for things like dates, entering an assessment dates, program entry dates. A good rule of thumb is the system kind of has min-maxes for that. You can't enter a date that's more than 120 years in the past, as well as for most things you can't enter a future date. It won't allow you to collect data in the future. There are some exemptions to that rule, such as some services allow you to be collected in the future. But if you do come along and you hit the save button and you see these validation messages, please take the time to kind of take a look at them. They should lead you to at least the data element or field that the system is kind of doesn't like. Should be able to fix it, move on your way. Okay, now we're going to go into the whole global data sharing section of it. And the first thing that we're going to go over is the client consent form, the new collaborative client consent form. The system, as we've talked about, has implemented true global data sharing, and depending on the client's recorded sharing level, none, some, or all of their personal data may be broadcasted throughout the system in what we call a global or master client profile. We've shown you a bunch of the different features that can be used through that, where you can look up global data profiles, you can download data elements, you know, those little notifications. There's also global data clients or global data sheets that clients may have that we're going to show you near the end of the class. Not only can this data be shared, but it can also be used and viewed, not only be shared and viewed by users, it also can be used, as we've seen. So that's why these sharing settings are very important. Now, we have released a new collaborative client consent form, been created for the new data sharing settings, and we will have it released by the system release. Should be on our website and should be available within the system as well. So that will make the old client consent forms pretty much extinct. They're going to be null and void. So once the new system comes out, not allowed to use any of those old consent forms. And it's one of those, you know, start from here. You're not going to have to go back and recollect, you know, client consent forms from anybody in the system. But any new clients that you see or any clients that want to change their sharing policy going forward, I have to use this new one. And as we said before, you know, when you collected this form and entered it in the system, it didn't mean a whole lot. It was more of a setting. Now it is for real. So you need to be very careful that whatever setting the client and the caseworker work out on the client consent form, that's the one that you mimic and mirror in the system. The collaborative client consent form must be reviewed and signed by every adult client. This is not a household form. If you got 2 adults and 2 children coming into your agency, can't have one form for all of them. It's not a household form. Prior to enacting a global data sharing policy in the system, now it doesn't have to be collected off the bat, but once you want to share their data or they want to do a program enrollment, that's when a collaborative consent form must be done. Now we have changed up a little bit. While now every adult client needs one, we have allowed accompanying children that are there with adults in a household to be included with the adult in the household. However, they can also have their own form if you wish, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. It'll be up to the determination of the agency which direction they want to go with. Now, the client consent form only pertains to sharing client data outside your agency. It's basically the global updates, the global broadcasts. Permission to enter data into the system is implied and requires no written or verbal consent. So even if a client, refuses to share their data outside your agency, you still have the right, based on your own privacy notices and privacy policies, to put that data into the system and use it within your own agency. This is a kind of a screenshot of what the new client consent form looks like. This is only the second page. The first page contains a whole bunch of language and information and stipulations that should definitely be carefully reviewed, and every caseworker or case manager and intake worker should take a look at that, be familiar with that. It's what's going to be explained to each client that signs it. There are 3 specific settings that they can select. The first one's I agree to allow sharing of my information. That's what we call full sharing within the system. The second one's I agree to allow sharing of my information but wish to limit sharing of certain data elements. The system allows the mixing and matching of sharing certain and not sharing other data elements in the system. That's what we refer to as customized sharing. When doing this, we also have a supplemental form that basically has all the data and elements that can groups and elements that can be shared or not shared. That should be filled out and sat down with the client so you can know what their settings are. The last one is the I do not agree to share, allow any sharing of my information outside the agency, and that's our none or no data, client data sharing. As we said before, every adult client, not household, is required to sign, select a sharing level and sign it. As we see here, we've put in a list dependence area that allows children to be included on their guardian's consent form. Now, that can only be used if whatever data sharing policy the adult has, the child must also have. It's basically the guardian is signing over saying, hey, this, this accompanying child is also going to share my same settings as well. If they are going to have different settings, then they do need a specific consent form to be signed and updated. And also, since they're usually children, the guardian will probably have to be involved with their signature as well. Both the agency name, you need to put down the name of the agency that this person is visiting and going to have their data shared within, as well as the agency personnel needs to sign that. Now we're going to show basically where you record these data sharing policies within the system. We basically created a data sharing page within each client profile, page to be filled out basically to enact data sharing that very closely mimics that collaborative consent form, and that's why that new consent form must be used. When going into this tab, it basically allows for the 3 different sharing settings as we talked about, the full data, the custom data, and the no data sharing forms. Basically, depending on each one, it allows a little bit different flexibility for what can be selected below. Now, this is a continuation. Here's the top of the screen. Directly below it, as we're going to show now, basically shows all the data elements in the system that can be shared or not shared. We've basically spent a whole lot of time breaking up the system into individual data elements to allow them all to be shared or unshared individually. All the ones listed on the left-hand side contains all client profile-based information, like the client information, contacts, physical information, and additional sections. Basically, they mimic all the data elements within the client profile. These are all related to the actual global profile. Any of the information shared here will be uploaded, and broadcast out using the profile that we showed you and the data updates and the global data sheet and everything. Now, these on the right-hand side are what are the assessments. Now, these are all the assessment data elements that can be shared or not shared, and these aren't actually specifically shared through any global updates, but any assessment that's collected during a program stay could be, depending on its sharing settings, broadcasted out through our new global data sheet. So basically, each different column and different data element set provides a different function of sharing within the system. So now we're going to go through each specific sharing setting quickly and kind of show you the different features involved with each one of them. The first one is full data sharing. You basically click the bubble here, and as you'll see, basically all the sharing elements will be shared by default. And basically all you have to do is hit save at the bottom of the screen, and basically that means all profile-based as well as assessment-based information will be turned on for that specific client. Now, the system does allow for the partially unsharing of data elements, even though the full data sharing section, data element sharing policy has been enacted. And one of the reasons we do that, because you think, well, if they're sharing some and not sharing others, why don't they just select custom? Well, the main reason we allow that in there is maybe the client did select full sharing, but later down the road, either the caseworker maybe decided, well, I'm not sure it's at the client's best interest to share this specific data set. The system allows them to, after the sharing level policy has been enacted, to specifically unshare data elements that they feel may not be in the client's best interest. And we want to keep the sharing policy setting to be exactly what's recorded on and signed for, by the agency and the client on the collaborative client form. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those the sharing maintenance options after we go through the individual sharing settings. Then there's the custom data sharing setting. Basically, it's the second bubble. And what it'll basically do is it does turn on all sharing for all elements. So basically, based on the supplemental form that the caseworker, the case manager, and the client have worked out, you'll need to go through and specifically uncheck each data element they don't want to share. As you can see here, basically, if the element is checked, that means it's shared throughout the system. If it's unchecked, it's not shared. And this provides a ton of flexibility in the different information that they want to share from both a profile and an assessment base. As you can see here, this specific client wants to share their name and their alias name, but not their date of birth, place of birth, or social security number. Conversely, with their health information, they want to share their disabling condition and developmental disability, but they do not want to share any information collected about their physical disability, chronic health condition, or their HIV status. So as you can see, it does definitely provides a ton of flexibility within the system. The final one, and probably the simplest one to understand, is the no data sharing selection. Basically, when that bubble is selected, the system will, by default, blank out all the data sharing. So there's no way to turn any of them on there, and basically, data sharing is deactivated in the system. Now, once you've gone through the data sharing policy, once you've selected a specific one and gone through all the different settings, there's a save button all the way down at the bottom of the page. You need to make sure that you select. Once you've selected that, it'll basically enact it, create a new data sharing agreement for that client that basically, per the rules of the collaborative consent form, any data sharing policy that's enacted will remain that way. There's no real expiration date on it until such time that the client wants to change it, and they can revoke that status by coming back into the agency, completing a new client consent form, and then the user will have to go back into the system and reapply that, and we'll show you the setting to do that at the end of this section. Now, some basic sharing rules once, kind of like a maintenance-based information. Once the data sharing policy is enacted, data elements that are currently set up to be unshared cannot be changed. The system rules in terms of updating or changing sharing settings in the middle of a data sharing policy is that data elements can be made to be more restrictive in terms of sharing, but never less. What we basically mean, if there's a data element that's currently shared, it can be turned off to be unshared, like unbroadcasted, but it can't go the other way. You can't have one that's unshared from the client consent form and make it shared. We definitely think that's in the best interest of both the agency and the client for that. Now, when making large-scale sharing changes, you know, if the client comes back and says, hey, I want to, you know, reshare this or unshare that, we definitely require a new client consent form to be filled out, as well as a new global data sharing policy be enacted, as well as if you have individual items that aren't shared that you want to make shared, basically to make them less restrictive. Those also call for a brand new global data sharing policy, as well as a new client consent form from the client and the agency to be enacted. Now, along with being able to basically review the data sharing page or your hard copy files in the system at your agency to see what their sharing settings are, the system has little visual representations of each data element that's shared or not within the system once a data policy has been enacted. As you can see here, we kind of use these little locks, kind of little padlock icons throughout the system to give kind of visual representation. Any padlock that has this little unlocked here, as you can see here, it's kind of swung open. Those are data elements that are currently shared by the client. Any padlock that's closed, as you see here, are basically not shared. Nice, quick, easy method to kind of view the profile as well as the assessments area to see what's shared or not. Now, as we talked about with the sharing maintenance, the system does allow individual items to be set to more restrictive. Any item that's currently shared can be turned off. You can do that either within the data sharing screen by simply unchecking the specific boxes and hitting save, and the system will basically, you know, take care of that situation and not share any new information going forward. However, not only are those visual icons within the profile and the assessment area visually based, they're also interactive and process-based. They can also be clicked on to basically make a data element more restrictive. Anyone that's currently locked, of course, since you can't make them less, less restrictive, they stay locked. You can't unlock them. But anyone that is currently with the padlock, you can basically click on it, and the system will basically turn it to a locked icon, basically representing, hey, turn it from shared to unshared. You can do that both on the profile with global data elements as well as on the assessment pages with the assessment data elements. Now, any unlocked item, you can basically click on it back and forth. It'll switch its properties until you actually save on that page, whether it's within the subsection or the entire page. The sharing status won't update. So if you go through and just like click to not share these items and leave the page, it won't share. You actually need to enact a save. Now, within the actual assessment area, remember back in the assessments where we said any completed assessment is locked down. Basically, everything is read-only, so you can't get to the data elements unless you hit an update field. The same thing goes for the sharing elements. They're all locked down as well. So what you have to do when you want to update either data elements in that assessment or the sharing settings, you need to click that update page, the update button, and it'll unlock them, and then you can basically change the locks, to lock an item and then resave it, and then it will get enacted. Now, there's a fundamental difference, as we kind of talked about on the data sharing page, between profile items and assessment items. Because profile items are directly uploaded and not only can be viewed but downloaded and used by other users, there is an additional step that is needed when you lock an item in between data sharing policy to basically ask the user, hey, what do you want to do with data already shared? Now, assessments don't have this information because they're only shared in real time on the global data sheet. Can't really be used. It can only be viewed. Now, once you lock a data element in between a data sharing policy, whether you click on the lock icon or actually uncheck the box in the data sharing screen, the system will ask you a set of questions. And since it might not be used too often, we basically pop this whole message up here. So if you're not sure, don't remember, or need a refresher, we've got, and because it's so important, it basically provides all the information you need on the different selections. Now, any data that's, since the item was originally shared, it could have sent up some data values up to the global profile. Once you lock that item, the system basically needs to ask you, hey, what do you want to do with that data that's already been uploaded? You basically have one of two choices. You can redact the information, which basically removes all previously uploaded data from the client's global profile. So not only will it turn off any new data from being sent up, it'll actually go up to the profile and pull them down, so any data previously sent can no longer be viewed or used. So you kind of use this if a mistake was made or some data got accidentally sent up to the global profile and you realize it and you want to get it out of there, that's the option you want to use. The update button can be used if any previously data was sent up there, you want to remain up there. You said, hey, the data that was sent up there, that's okay. We don't want to pull it back down. We can leave it up there for, for people to see. But any new data going forward that I enter, I don't want to send up there. And the situation could be maybe the client has a new assessment information, a new status that, they didn't have that information, so they didn't mind sharing it before, but now because of the new information, they don't want to share it. So you want to update, that information, then enter the new data element going forward. They also have another option called cancel, which basically cancels the whole process, resets everything back to what it originally was during that, before you even enacted the sharing settings. Now, please note that this is only for client-based data elements. When a change to a data sharing policy includes either a large change or you need to flip something to shared, or a client wants to revoke whatever sharing they have, the system allows you to enact a new global data sharing policy. Basically, when you go in there after it's created, everything will be grayed out. From the sharing levels, you can't just change it on the fly. It's basically, again, processed within the system. You'll have a create new agreement button. You click on that button, what it'll do is it'll clear the entire screen, and it basically allows you to, start from scratch again. You pick your new level. Depending on the level you pick, all the elements will fill in or be closed out, and use all the process that you have again. When you do this process, it is expected that a new collaborative client consent form, signed, completed, is accompanying this new setting update. Before we take a break, we are going to also show that we do have some data sharing reports within the system as well. They include two flavors, basically a data sharing report and a data usage report. They basically show a little bit different information. Because of the importance of actually sharing this information, we've put a lot of work into collecting almost every single tidbit of data that's shared, when it was shared, who it was shared by, when it was used, who downloaded it, who looked at it. Basically, so any situation we can always track back almost on a per client, per data element basis for agencies as well as users. If they request, hey, I'd like to see, where my data's gone, these are available. Now, the data sharing report basically shows all the information that has been shared, that has been marked as shared during this data sharing policy, as well as all the elements that have gone up, the values. So if they shared, date of birth, it shows also the specific value that's gone out, and it could be one value or, multiple values depending on how many updates that have occurred. Now, the data usage report basically shows of those data elements that have been uploaded, how many of them have actually been used. And there's two ways basically they can be used. It's, as we showed before, the global data profile import. If another agency imports that data, or actually uses those individual data updates notifications, you know, the little globe updates. If they click on them and use that data, that also gets recorded in this report. And it shows the data element that was used, the agency it was used at, as well as the client and the user from the other agency that it was downloaded into and downloaded. It's pretty elaborate bunch of information that you can use just for your informational purposes, and also can be used if, you know, a data element was accidentally sent up to the global profile and you redact it. You can go and look and see if anybody else has accidentally grabbed it and used it, so you may be able to contact them and see if you can work out the problem to make sure that this information is secured within your agency. Now, just to note that every time a new data sharing policy is set, the system basically records all those upload and downloads in a data sharing, what we call agreement. Now, if your client only has one data sharing policy, you'll only have one agreement, and each report is based on that specific agreement. So if you've reset, you know, if you had 3 data sharing policies, all the uploads and downloads will be based on or within each of those 3 sharing settings. So when you click on this report link, it'll basically load a new screen. You select which agreement or policy you want to look at, and then the system will basically prop out a report for you that's in a pretty decent format, pretty professional format that you can use for your own records or even provide to clients. Okay, we've reached our second break here. When we come back, then we'll kind of jump into all the program actions, enrollments, exits, and everything like that. It's about 11:13. We're going to take about a 10-minute break, stretch our legs, go to the restroom if we need. We'll meet back here at about 11:23, and we'll go ahead and answer any questions that people have. Thanks.
I have a question to answer right away from Wendy about the global data sharing. The off-the-record answer, Wendy, is that we always prefer full data sharing. Everybody should prefer full data sharing to make the system as useful as possible for everyone. However, you know, we have to do the right thing too and give the option for the client to actually choose in earnest what they wanted to be shared and not shared. So you can they can certainly customize that. Obviously, any level of data sharing is better than none, but you know, if you guys can coerce or convince or talk them into full data sharing, that would certainly be the best, but it's not required by any means. The client consent form, responding to a question here from Michelle, the client consent form literally is a system snapshot of the signed form. So if there is a signed form from a client, that needs to be in the system. You know, their responses need to be in the system. You don't need to reassess it annually, and you know, vice versa. You don't only need to do it once. You need to do it anytime that client signs that form again. All right, we have a couple more questions here before Brian gets cracking again. Two questions about income, surprisingly. Income is always supposed to be credited to the person who received the income. Typically, child support would be income received by the parent on behalf of the child. However, it doesn't have to be. That's kind of up to you. But any income should be credited to the person who actually receives the income. Similarly, with there was a question specifically about disability. Again, the person who has a disability and who received the income, that's who it should be credited to. And hold on, I'm reading this other question here. Okay, a question about client consent forms. Every adult has to sign their own client consent form. The only time you can have someone sign on behalf of another person is if it's a parent or guardian signing on behalf of the children. And in that case, if the parent or guardian is signing on behalf of the children, then everyone for whom that client consent form applies needs to have the same data sharing levels. If those data sharing levels need to be customized, maybe one child is okay to share something, another child is not, then that parent or guardian needs to fill out a separate client consent form for each child.
Okay, we're going to get, we're about halfway through. Now we're going to focus in on the program side of the new system. But prior to getting into the individual processes like entry and exit, we want to briefly discuss the program area of the system. Most of our existing users should be fairly familiar with it. We haven't really changed the basic layout of it. Since we covered most of the client profile stuff, and a lot of that stuff's been changed, a lot of new features in this new section too. Under the Program and Services tab, that's where all your program records and services and entry and exit dates and also bed inventory information is all kept. Within this area, if the client currently has any program records, enrollment stays, whether they're currently enrolled or been exited out, they'll be listed here in each individual record. Clicking on each record will basically provide information on that specific stay. Then we also have created the new program enrollment utility here that basically allows for the enrollment of the client into a new program stay. And we're going to kind of go into that. All program events, such as program enrollments and exits, are all now process-based, kind of keeping with the same theme of everything being process-based. And when started, the system will walk you through the necessary steps and screens to collect the required data and complete the process. For our existing users, there used to be like a program enrollment, and you'd have to click over to this page to enter in one data element, and then you'd actually have to know things about the system to find the data element to enter it in. That no longer is, that's the thing of the past now, because everything's basically going to walk you through almost in a wizard-like selection that you just need to know the data that you have, and it'll basically walk you through the screens. The program enrollment consists of about 4 or 5 different parts. There is the initial program selection. Then there is a household selection area, because program enrollments, as the third bullet point says, now allow for entire households to be entered into a program at the same time. But we have a pretty intuitive process that also allows each client to have separate data collected all within the same kind of loop process. There's the data element validation, and then there's the assessment loop, and the final enrollment screen steps. So we'll kind of go through each one of those each time. And with the household, it doesn't matter if you're doing 1 person, 2 people, 10 people, the system will support and dynamically build screens depending on how many people are included in this specific enrollment. Now, the first thing that you need to do is go to the new enrollment enrollment utility, and basically it has the familiar, you pick the program and the site that the client is going to be enrolled into, and the programs basically are based on the agency the client's in, as well as the permissions that the user has, you know, which programs that user has permission to administer that program from. Once you've selected the program, the site list will be dynamically built. Now the site, you know, has changed in the system for some time. It's now basically a physical site location, and that's where the program is being physically administered from. So once you select those, you basically click the Enroll button, and the next step it'll take you to is what we call a household selection screen. Throughout the processes and everything, we kind of call these the household selection grids, and the system will basically show you all the current households this particular client has for inclusion or exclusion in this particular program. Now, to include the client, all you basically have to do is check the box. You can check one, all, none, depending on whatever you need. Click the enrollment button again, then you're off and running with that many people in the process. Now, as we've said before, every client must have an active global data sharing policy prior to being enrolled in a new program. Any client that does not have a data sharing policy will not be permitted to be included in the process, because the data sharing policy is so important, and it has such a specific entry process. Any client, whether it's the original client you selected, in an individual process, or any household members you've selected, don't have a sharing policy, the system's just going to stop it right then and there, and you're going to get a little message that says, warning, system has identified the following clients. They don't have a data sharing policy. It'll actually list the name of the clients for you, and you can do one of two things there. You can restart the process and not include those specific clients, or you'll need to go back and set up a specific data sharing policy, as we've explained earlier, and then reset the process and include all the members that you want in this enrollment. The next check that it goes through, once it goes through the data sharing check, is performs a second check to ensure every client included has completed all the required, what we call universal profile-based data sharing elements on their client profile. While the client profile only requires an agency and a name to be initially collected during the enrollment or during the creation process, to enroll a client in the program, the system and HUD for programs, since most of the programs are homeless-based, requires these data elements: date of birth, Social Security number, ethnicity, race, gender, and veteran status to be completed prior to the enrollment. Now, any of those clients that are missing one or more of these data elements will be required to collect them during this enrollment step. As we mentioned earlier, you know, you're allowed to do any kind of partial data collection, but once you do an enrollment, the system will require specific ones to be entered. Now, rather than like with the data sharing process, instead of stopping the process, you know, showing the clients, making you go back to the profile, visit each one for each client, manually fill in the data elements, save it, then restart the process, we decided to kind of intuitively include this within the enrollment process. So once it's collected, you can pretty much collect them and keep on going in the process. Now, what the system does is when you come here, we kind of have a client looping process, and we'll kind of explain that a little bit more when we get into the assessment part of it. But every single client included in this process will have their own grid basically here. It could be just one client if it's a single-person enrollment, or 8 clients if that's how many people are included in the household. And what it'll show is it's kind of a dynamically built screen here for each client of all the elements that we've mentioned before that are required that may be missing. Now, as you see here, here's the basic 6. This is, I guess, a worst-case scenario, you know, that the client basically doesn't have any of the required data elements, and they all will be required to be entered at this time before they are completed. Now, once you're done, you basically can hit Save and Next, and the system will basically loop to each client that's in the enrollment to make sure all of them are completed. Now, once you've gone through the first enrollment, once these elements are completed and saved, the system will actually write them back to the client profile, so that once they're kind of collected, any subsequent enrollment you do, I mean, they're there. You probably won't have to collect things like date of birth, Social Security number, and stuff like that again after the initial enrollment. However, during this process, there is a specific data element that is required to be revisited and at least confirmed for every program enrollment. And the system will prompt for this response for each client to kind of take another look at this data element, even if it has been specifically answered, and that's veteran status. Basic HUD requires this one to be relooked at every entry. Even if it is a subsequent enrollment and all the other data elements are completed, what the system will do is if it has been completed, each client will actually, it'll kind of pull in their current profile data element, whether it's no or yes, for the user to basically confirm it. If the information hasn't changed, basically you just hit save on it, save and next, go to the next client, and kind of go through that confirmation stage. Now, you also, at this point in time, have the ability to change it. You know, maybe, I don't know, if someone wasn't a veteran, or at least they reported they weren't a veteran during their initial stay, but during their second stay, they become more comfortable, whatever, they should now let out that they are a veteran. You can easily just change this to yes, and continue on your way with the enrollment, and any new information collected will be written out to the profile. Now, as with the veteran status on the client profile, same thing here in the data element section. When you hit yes to it, the system will also open up with a military history grid that allows for collection of military history, whether you need to initially enter it, whether it needs to be changed, updated, a new service area is added, as we previously discussed. Once those two checks are done with and our confirmation screens are done with, the system will launch into what is known as what we call an assessment loop, in which all required as well as optional program-specific data elements are displayed to allow the proper data collection prior to enrollment occurring. Now, all the 6 main sections within a profile are within the client assessment area will be, again, prompted for, and that includes health, education, employment, income, benefits, as well as domestic violence. Now, during this assessment loop, users have the opportunity to collect data on a per-client basis for each above assessment screens. Now, what the system will also do is associate any data collection, any data collected per assessment to this program that you're enrolling into, as well as the entry, basically the program entry assessment type. So instead of for our existing users that used to have to enter these information, especially the income and benefits, and pick, oh, it's an entry or this is an exit, the system knows the process you're doing and will automatically do that work for you. Now, while each program enrollment will contain all 6 of these by default, depending on the program type, basically we have from the HUD data standards, we know which program types require which assessments to be included during entry and exit. The system will categorize those and either require or place them as optional. Those that are required will be highlighted in red and have the little asterisk. Basically, that means that assessment needs to be completed for all clients included in the enrollment before you can continue to the next assessment or finish the process and, you know, continue on to the next step. Any ones that are optional, usually, you know, the health and the education and employment ones are optional for all programs. It's your choice, you know, depending on your individual agency rules or what you want to collect for program types, COC rules that are enacted. That information can be collected as you wish. You can collect it for just the adults, one of the clients, none of the clients. It's basically up to you to what you want to do. Now, when you hit a required element, the next elements will not be shown. It's basically a, hey, you got to finish this before we show you what's next. However, if you go to the next element, like education, it'll basically is smart enough to open up until you hit the next required element, because it basically allows you a nice, easy navigation in between each one. Now, as we kind of talked during the data elements section, where it kind of shows all the clients, it kind of provides a looping process to basically collect a data element as well as assessment information on a per client basis. We think we did this on a fairly logical, straightforward manner. Hopefully it'll only take a couple enrollments to kind of get the hang of it. And as I said before, each client will be listed with their name as well as the status of whether the data has been completed or not. All of them, when initially entering an assessment loop or even the data element validation, all have the status of incomplete. That means, hey, no data has been saved or collected for this specific client. And as the information is completed and you cycle through clients, the status will be updated. Now, this is an example of the 3 PHMIS clients, and we're hitting the health assessment, and since it is required, you can see here there's tabs that open up, allows you to focus singularly on this one required assessment. It opens up all the individual information, kind of just as we explained in the assessment loop. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the collection here, because those, whether you're doing it during a program or a general, it's all the same rules. You fill in the data elements, you basically enter in the assessment date, and then you can either hit save or save and next. We definitely recommend hitting the save and next feature, because what it'll do is not only will it complete the process, save the data to the client, it'll cycle the person to the next one in the grid. And also, once you get to the end of the grid and everyone's completed, if you hit save and next, the system is smart enough to know that all the clients are completed, it'll actually automatically take you to the next assessment tab. So it's very smart of just entering the data you need, save and next, entering the data you need, and you kind of just go through this entire process until you're finished with the enrollment loop. Now, as I kind of said before, once they're all completed, you have the ability to move forward. Now, because of some of those scenarios that could have a large amount of clients and everything there, it could be easy to kind of lose your place. Hey, what client am I on? What data should I put in? So up here on this blue information bar, you always want to check it, because it always shows the specific client you're on right now. Whatever screen's there, that's the information you're collecting for the client, what assessment it is, as well as what process you're performing, an entry or an exit, a health assessment. So if you kind of lose your place and you're like, oh, which person, what data am I entering? Just take a little glance up here, and it should put you back on track wherever you are. As we kind of said before, required assessments basically stops you. Don't see the next tab. Once you do complete that, if you hit save and next, it'll automatically move along. But if you do just hit save, the system will basically, just like in the assessments place within the client profile, allows these forward and backward navigation buttons to be activated. They'll only be activated when certain requirements are required. However, if you get to the employment ones, education ones, these will automatically be enabled, because it's optional. You can do what you want for this specific program type. And you basically kind of just go through this entire process until you come to, at least with program enrollments, the domestic violence assessment. Use the same process in navigating it to it. Now, the enrollment process will be a little bit different than the exit one, because the enrollment does require both the data element validation, which also looks at the confirmation of the veteran status, as well as the domestic violence status. Same kind of rules. Basically, HUD requires that these data elements, even if they're initially filled out, need to be reconfirmed or can be changed at that time. So you come in here and use pretty much the same process that you've used before. It'll suck in, since the domestic violence status will already be set, because it needs to be set prior to a global data sheet, which is sharing sheet, which is required before enrollment. It'll pull in the client's current domestic violence status, and basically you answer the same information, yes, no, enter the assessment date, and move along. Now, if the same information is there, you pretty much hit save and confirm it. But if it has changed, if a person is not one, was not a domestic violence victim, but now during this enrollment their information has changed and they are now, you can make that change. The same thing, you can toggle it back from yes and no, and the system will write that back to their current assessment within their client profile, and it'll basically go through the same exact rules. Once the assessment loop is finished, before we get into the finish of the assessment loop, the system actually has what we talked about, the ability to actually import these assessments withinto assessment loops. We kind of talked about the assessment date before, and all assessments entered need to have a manually entered assessment date, which indicates when the data was collected. This is also included in these assessment loops for enrollments and exits. You still will be required to enter in a new assessment date. Now, any assessment that was collected in a timely fashion, whether it was from a previous program enrollment or a general assessment, the system will allow that information to be imported if it was collected within 30 days of the current date. Now, we always want everything to be try to move toward a real-time data collection. So any data that has been collected and received from a client in 30 days, we feel is still valid and available to be reused. For each client, there'll basically be an import feature up at the top of the assessment. Basically, all you have to do is click on that import feature, and the system will pull in their latest assessment data, that's 30 days or less from the current date, and allows the user to reuse it. Now, when it pulls in, you can, we ask that you kind of re-look over it, make sure it's the right information. You can alter it if you'd like, but then again, you still have to enter in a new assessment date, and then when you save the information, it will get written back out as a new assessment associated specifically to this program enrollment.
I'm just going to butt in here for a minute. This is Dan. Based on some feedback from our testing group, we have a testing group that tests our software before we release it. I wanted to make a point about those assessments specifically, general versus program. It's designed to be as flexible as possible, and we understand that sometimes data collection is not always as timely as it could be, and that the 30-day restriction might impose a bit of a burden, for importing data. But the way we're looking at it is really there would be two different ways of collecting data. Some users like to collect data or need to collect data over a period of time. The assessments may not all be done the same day. Maybe it takes a week to get all the assessments in. In that case, you need the ability to collect those assessments well before enrolling them in the program. And for those people, we didn't want to penalize anyone for having to do it that way, so we created this import feature. However, if you are putting a client into the system and you know that you're going to immediately roll them in the program, don't bother with the general assessments. Just use the program processes, and that program process will automatically write assessments back out to the assessment tab. So it's kind of up to your style, whichever way you want to do it, but choose one or the other so you don't get frustrated.
Okay, now we're going to go on to, once the assessment loop is done, what we call, the final enrollment screen, which includes program entry data elements. That includes the 5 required data elements, the entry date, housing status at entry, residence prior to entry, length of stay at previous residence, as well as the zip code of the last permanent residence. Now, prior to the enrollment, each client will need these entry data elements collected, which will then be associated to their individual program record. However, the system does allow the same information to be collected and saved for multiple clients simultaneously. However, this kind of a very new process here for the enrollment. The system is also very flexible during this enrollment stage, and it can allow for included clients to be enrolled together with the same information, or each client can be enrolled one at a time with different information. It's up to the user and the situation of how they want to collect this information. And we're going to show you kind of what we mean after we kind of go over these entry data elements. As we see here is basically a screenshot of the enrollment screen that you're going to come to. It's basically got the program and site hard-coded from when you selected the enrollment, the entry date, which basically is the first day is determined to use the start of the client's period of program enrollment within the program when they start the program. Housing status and entry basically needs to be determined by the case manager or intake worker when entering a client into the program. It has basically 3 valid housing statuses that need to be entered. We'll talk a little bit more about them in the next slide. Then prior residence and length of stay are basically information on each client, where they were on the night before the enrollment, selects from the predefined list, as well as the zip code of last permanent residence if the client knows that knows that information. And as we said, all this information needs to collect on a per-client basis. As for the housing status, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but just a little bit of added information. Like I said before, needs to be determined by each case manager before enrolling each client. Needs to be selected from one of the following 3 valid selections: literally homeless, eminently losing their housing, and unstably housed and at risk of losing their housing. And basically, the determination needs to be made based on their current housing situation. You know, are they homeless? Are they about to lose their home? Are they, on the cusp, 30, 60 days from losing their home? It's basically your judgment call of what you need to put in there. Now, for assistance and homeless assistance and homelessness prevention type programs, the system still uses this housing status and entry per client to determine what assistance type the client will be receiving. Now that HPRP is retired, most of the programs aren't going to use this, but there are still a couple programs that will use it. And homeless assistance type are people that are literally homeless, and homeless prevention are the ones that are either eminently losing their housing or unstably housed and at risk of losing their housing. Now, currently within the system, these relate to the new Emergency Solutions Grant Program type, which was developed for the 2011 second allotment rollout, and it only is currently for the assistance and prevention type services. That program breaks it up like that. As well as we have a couple agencies that are working on the supportive services for veteran families, basically the SSVF program, also uses this housing status to determine what assistance types each client will receive in the program. Now, with the actual enrollment screen, along with having those data elements up at the top, basically it'll show every client that's been enrolled into the program. It's basically, again, our household selection list. That by default no clients are selected. Now, the system allows users to choose which clients are going to be enrolled into the program at the same time using the same exact information. This is where you basically have the determination of, hey, what information set do I want to write to which clients during their enrollment? You can select all of them at once and enter. You can select all 3 of them, and whatever data elements you enter is exit date, housing status, they're all going to share those same data elements and write out to the program record. However, you can select, one at a time or whatever combinations depending on how many different sets of data needs to be collected within each program record. And basically, once you've filled out the data, we'll kind of show you here, using this example, once you fill out the data, the system will write the record, and any existing clients that remain that weren't checked, the system loops around again to collect a brand new set of entry data. As you see here, for this specific situation, all 3 clients don't share the same data set. So during the first enrollment loop, what we kind of call it, is these first 2 people were checked. These entry dates and housing status and residence were entered. Then you basically hit the save button. The system will automatically enroll those 2 clients, create program records for them, and attach that data to it. Now, because the system says, hey, there's one guy that hasn't been checked, it basically will loop around. The 2 clients that are already done with will be taken care of, and that last person will be left in the grid, and it'll basically reset this screen for you to recollect a whole new set of data. You check this person, as you see here, you had a different entry date, a different residence prior to entry, so you need to do a separate loop with this person, and when you hit save, bam, that client will get a program record with that new data. Now, after you hit save, the system will notice, hey, wait a minute, there's no more clients here that I need to deal with. It'll basically kick itself out of the process, and you're basically done with the enrollment. So that's kind of how the final enrollment screen works. Hopefully everybody will like the flexibility. Now, probably most time all the clients are going to have the same data element, but in those cases where they're different, instead of having to go through entire enrollment loops, multiple times, this little feature at the end should be very helpful and reduce a bunch of time with data collection. Now, once a user has completed the program enrollment phase, answered all that information, as we showed at the beginning, the system will create an individual record. Now, each program record is still on a per-client basis, and it'll basically be shown here. As you can see here, this client is in a transitional housing and an SSO program at the same time. Now, by simply clicking on which program you want to visit, the system will basically open up the screen, and it'll show all the previously entered entry data, exit data if applicable, plus what we're going to cover in the next couple slides, services that can be associated with the client, as well as some bed inventory that will be covered in the supplemental training. Now, while a client can have multiple programs, and that process is probably going to be used a lot more since there's a single client profile per agency, the same program shouldn't have any overlapping dates. The system basically has validation in there to prevent that. So if you see any validation errors saying, hey, the client's already in that program, take a look at the dates to make sure that you're not overlapping anything there. Kind of what we talked about during the enrollment stage, the system is controlled during the enrollments by each individual user's permissions based on their user profile. Referred to what we call as a program and a site combination. User can't have a permission to just a program or just a site. They need to be, it's a combination together. If you do notice that you don't have a program, that you think you should have, please talk to your agency management team. They are the ones that can actually configure and add stuff to your profile. The help desk can lead you in the right direction, but unless we have prior authorization, we can't automatically give you permission to one of the agency's programs. Now, the same rules apply for existing programs. When you go and visit a client that has programs, for those programs that you have permission to enroll them in and also configure data in, there'll be the regular gray record. You can click on it, enter the program, be good to go. Now, however, for those programs that you don't have permission to, that are administered by other users in the agency, they will be kind of powdered in this light blue. When you click on the record, it won't actually let you into the program record, but what it'll do is it'll actually take you to a client data sheet, which our existing users should be familiar with, that provides you with a whole bunch of client information about the services and assessments collected for that program record, but it's basically in a read-only format, and this is the same permissions that are used in the new assessments area based on the site and user permissions. Okay, now we're going to talk about the services that you can associate to each client during their program enrollment. Most of this stuff is for existing users hasn't changed. It's pretty much the same. The one big difference is we used to have a lot of HPRP versus others kind of services here. That's kind of gone. HPRP has been retired. However, there are still remnants of the two different service types, and they're going to be explained here. There's basically the financial assistance and stabilization services that currently are under the Emergency Solutions Grant and the SSVF programs. Then there's the services provided, which are for all the other COC, Shelter Plus Care. It's basically the residential and supportive service only type programs within the system. And we're going to go over both the entry interfaces and the features associated with each. Now, as HUD goes forward, we've kind of seen that each program could possibly be moving toward having specialized services, and that's kind of even started with these financial assistance and stabilization service groups. While they both have the kind of same look and feel, the ESG and SSV do have different sets of services, and they're the ones that you see on here. Any Emergency Solution Grant, the 2011, well, these financial and these housing relocation and stabilization services that can be provided. Now, these type of services fall into one of two categories. They can either be one-time services, which cover a single day and include things as arrears payments, one-time payments, or single-day services where you only meet with them for a single day, and the system will only prompt the user for basically the day of service. If it's an assistance, probably the payment amount. Ongoing services cover a period of time, could be a week, could be a month, could be up to 3 months, and it usually prompts users for a date range. SSVF?
Actually, I'm going to cut in here, Brian. With the ESG, I know some of you on the phone are ESG recipients, and I know that a lot of you are probably thinking, hey, where's the rest of ESG? The answer is, we don't know yet. We're still waiting on data standards, and I'm hesitant to make any kind of official decisions about what the new ESG, 2012 and on should look like as far as data collection without having that input first. But trust us, as soon as we know, you guys will know, but we are not ignoring the fact that that we're missing some of the ESG stuff. Back to you, Brian.
Thanks. With the SSVF stuff, pretty much the same format, but as you can see, they have some added financial assistance, some reduced stabilization services, pretty much the same formats. Now, with these assistance and stabilization services, there are a couple entry and maintenance rules. The system will validate end dates for ongoing services. No service can exceed 3 months in duration. All service dates should fall also within the program participation stay. This is pretty much for all services. You know, you can't have an service date can't start before the entry date, can't end after the exit date. Have validation in the system to prevent that. Now, with these financial assistance and stabilization services, we do allow for the ability to be replicated automatically to all qualified household members when the following 3 conditions are met. Our HPRP participants that dealt with the HPRP program should be very familiar with this. Basically, the same 3 rules. The person's got to be in the program, same program, has to have the same housing status, and has to be in the household during the time of the service. Anytime those are met, basically the system will look and replicate that service out to everybody in that household. Makes data collection a little bit easier. It also helps to replicate any updated service, whether it's an ongoing service, if you leave them open and then you go to enter an end date, or you update any kind of like financial payment amount if there's a mistake made. The system will also replicate those changes out. Now, please note that for these services, both the service type, the subtype, as well as the start date are locked down. They're very integral to the replication process. So if those are a mistake, you will need to delete the service and re-enter it. And basically, we'll show you in the next slide here. There's basically 2 processes to delete the service. You can do it, remove it from a single client, or it allows you to remove it from an entire household. Basically, to remove it, any service, you basically click on it, enters into the grid area, you just simply hit the remove button. Down here, you'll see remove from entire household. Checkbox, if you know the service was replicated out and you made a mistake, you know you want to remove it from everybody, just check this box during the process. You need to check this before you hit the remove button. When it does that, then it will, depending on that option, remove it from all the household members that had it replicated out. The basic services grid, and as you can see here, there's a financial assistance grid that's basically got all the drop-downs. You basically walks you through the process, entering all the information it requires. Same thing with the stabilization services over here. It is located directly below the entry and exit date, kind of almost in the middle of the program record screen. Now, any action that's done, whether it's adding a new service, updating an old existing service, deleting a service, you will need to hit the save button at the bottom of the screen. We've converted most things to real time in the system. This is the one thing we haven't because of the replication process. So make sure you do hit save at the bottom of the service, the program page to update any changes. The services provided, this is for the residential or SSO services programs. They are located pretty much in the same place within the program history page, directly below the save buttons. Basically, it's a HUD predefined list. It's got a whole bunch of different services that you can associate to clients. Same rules. Services can't fall outside the program participation dates. As you see here, it's basically located right above here is, you know, all the entry and exit information that's entered for the program. Service grid will be directly below that. You basically have a whole bunch of choices, or you can pick, you know, temporary housing, case management, referrals, outreach, a whole bunch of information. Put in the start and end date. If it's a one-time, you can go ahead and close it out. If it's an ongoing service, you can leave it open. Just hit the add button, and it'll basically get added to the client. And, of course, you add, with all services, you add all the services that the client has received during that specific program stay. Okay, that comes to our third and final break. When we come back, we will go over the exit process, as well as kind of launch into a whole big client management tools and go over the data sheets and stuff like that. It's about 12:05. We will take a 10-minute break. We'll meet back here at about 12:15. After that, we'll probably keep you here another 30, 40, 35 minutes, hopefully get you out of here a little before 1. Then we'll go ahead. Right now, we're going to have a little question and answer session again. See you in about 10 minutes. Thanks.
All right, we have a question here. Linda, I'm actually just going to read it. I guess it's a good thing I'm here because Brian and Steve probably wouldn't know this answer. For residential and SSO project services that are directly provided, also include those that are funded through leveraged or in-kind services and should be reported also, correct? Answer is correct. If you have a funding source that requires leveraging or in-kind services, then those services or leveraging are considered to be part of that funding source. Linda, sure. I'm actually going to go have a quick cigarette, and when I come back, we'll get started again. I'll re-answer that question for the benefit of everyone. All right, we're back. I'm going to re-answer a question about leveraging and in-kind services that is kind of very applicable right now because of the COC program funding round. And just on a side note, we want to apologize that we're hammering on these trainings so bad. We've gotten a lot of feedback that's really bad timing because of the funding, but to be fair, we've had these trainings scheduled for months, and we couldn't push it back anymore. That's HUD's fault, not ours. Anyway, the question is, let me find it here again. For residential and SSO projects, services that are directly provided, should they also include those that are funded through leveraged or in-kind services? The answer is yes. Especially when it comes to HUD, if you are required to have leveraging or more specifically for HUD, in-kind services, those services are considered to be part of your overall funding in a sense, and because of the requirements, those are considered part of your grant, and so those should also be recorded in HMIS for reporting purposes.
All right, let's go ahead and kick off with the final part of the training. Got about 30 so slides to get through. We're going to have the exit process, and then we'll go through a bunch of client management tools. So a lot of them are the same, but we have a few new ones. The exit process, once a client's enrolled into a normal data collection or into a program, performing such thing as appropriate services, bed inventory, and they've finished their stay. Basically, when you click on the program record, what we have here is basically assessment-based processes, and we'll talk about those as well during the session. And everything being a process, when they need to be enrolled, basically you click on this exit assessment button, and basically it'll start the process, and you kind of very similar to the enrollment, a lot of the same screens that we're going to see, and you kind of do the whole thing all over again. The exit assessment consists of, again, the household selection. You can exit multiple clients at the same time as well, an assessment loop to recollect any data element exit that you need to, as well as the final exit screen. The system basically steps and walks the user through all the necessary data screens again. As I said, you can exit a single person, multiple people, and it, of course, allows for anybody also currently enrolled into that program to be included to collect all the different data for each client simultaneously. Once you select each individual member, as you see here, the assessment loop works the same time. As we said, basically during the entry, the data element validation as well as the domestic violence assessment are no longer needed. Those are only entry type data collection assessments or pieces of information, and then basically based on whether they are required or optional, you basically use the same process to go to the screen, go through the client loops, going through all the assessments. At any time, one note that we do want to make is anytime you are doing an enrollment or entry, there is a start page button up at the top of this enrollment loop or enrollment or assessment loop for exits. To abort the process. Say you may be in the middle of it and you say, oh, I don't have the right information here and I want to go ahead and, kick it out to collect the right information. You can go ahead and hit the start page and it'll basically take you to your start page. But if you have collected, because the system always wants to keep collected data, if you've gone through and collected, a couple of assessments or a couple clients have data, we don't want to lose that data. We don't want to just discard it. So what the system will do is if the process is aborted, we'll automatically write those assessments to that client, but instead of being associated to the program, they are going to be associated to just the client as a general assessment. Now, the same thing at entry, kind of opposite at exit. When you do complete these assessments, you don't need to select any kind of type. Each piece of data will automatically get associated to that program you're exiting, plus it'll have the type of a program exit. It's all automatically done based on your process. Now, once you've gone through another assessment loop, everything's collected. The exit screen is the final step in the exit process, and it does contain 4 required data elements. The program exit date, the reason for leaving, the destination, as well as the housing status at exit. And we kind of have the same process as the enrollment that every client needs to have all these data elements collected for each client, and each set will be associated to each individual program record, but the system also allows the flexibility to collect the same data elements at the same time, or each of them independently. And we'll kind of show you the quick loop again. Here's a quick look at the data elements that need to be collected. The basic assessment date needs to be typed in, and that's basically the date when they're exiting the program, last day of residential, when the last day they're in housing, or the last day of receiving services. Reason for leaving, it's basically a drop-down list that basically shows the reason they're leaving. If there's more than one reason, we do ask that you pick the one that best fits the client's situation or the multiple client situation. Destination, this data element best describes where the client will be staying as of the last day of the program. The destination has become a very important data element and a large part of a leaver or data set. Almost every APR and report that's coming out has a big leaver section that cross-references what the client's destination information is. It's used very much as an outcome tool for the program, so putting in an accurate destination is very important. And then there's the final housing status at exit. Again, pretty much the same rules at entry. You need to take a determination. It's a judgment call by the case manager intake worker on which of the four housing statuses at program exit the client has. What's their housing situation when they're leaving the program? They could be literally homeless, imminently losing their housing. And also, you have the available choice for stably housed, which is basically a very good outcome metric when a client is leaving a program and can be selected if they are going into a permanent housing situation. Now, directly above those data elements, again, is our familiar household selection grid that basically works exactly the same as the entry. You can select all the clients, select all the members that are included, fill out the screen. When you hit save, the system will write that same data set to all the included clients, or you can do them one at a time. The system is smart enough to know that once a save is done, it'll look at the grid. If there's any left, it'll basically loop around again, same process. It'll continue those loops until all the clients have been satisfied. Now, another option that we do have here is, you see this little minus sign here? If you get to a point, and this is during entry or exit, if you're like, oh, well, this person, I don't really have his data, or he shouldn't have been included, if you check him and then click the minus sign, the system will actually remove him from the household grid. Now, any assessments collected for that client will still be saved as general assessments, won't be associated to the program, but it kind of allows you to, you know, if you're not ready to do something with the client, to kind of abort at this last stage. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the interim assessments. Once a client's enrolled in the program, the system provides process-based functions to continue with necessary data collection in terms of assessments. These program assessments can be labeled in a couple different terms. You know, if the client is still enrolled in the program, basically any data assessment that's collected, whether it's health, employment, income, is labeled with what we call the during program enrollment label. And those are the kind of information that are usually the annual assessments, like if a client's been in the program for longer than a year, and is also used in a lot of reporting on APRs for your stayer data. So if you need to enter in that information, and you can do it more often if you want to do it every 3 months, maybe collect their income every 3 months, or health information as it changes, that's what you can use. Then the follow-up is a label that's provided to assessments that are collected after the client has already left the program. Now, as with entry and exit, the system will automatically label an assessment based on its date, whether it is during program enrollment or follow-up automatically, and we'll talk a little bit about that during that section. Now, the system also allows for both entry and exit assessments that were optional. Like, say you went through an enrollment loop and you didn't collect education or employment because you didn't think you needed it or didn't have that information. It allows you to go and backfill those assessments and attach them to a program on both the entry and exit program events. Now, just a note, with all these interim assessments, they are only collected on a per-person basis. You know, while you can do the whole entry and exit, the whole bunch of people, these assessments, please remember, they're a single client at a time. Now, there's basically the three different buttons here, as we kind of talked about earlier, that basically have the entry, interim, and exit assessment. And basically selecting each of these buttons, again, it's all process-based, will basically send the user on another walkthrough process, kind of assessment type, almost a mini assessment loop, to collect whatever information they need on a per-client basis. Now, the entry and assessment and exit assessment buttons, like I said before, allow for the collection of optional data elements that weren't originally collected during the process. Now, the entry assessment button is only going to be available if the client still has optional assessments that haven't been collected. So if you have a client that goes through an enrollment and collects everything, health, education, employment, income, and benefits, that button will no longer be available for that client because, you know, each client only gets one entry and one exit assessment per type per program. Now, if the information is wrong, you can go back and edit that information, but it can no longer be created. Now, the assessment, exit assessment button basically has kind of two different functions depending on what the status of the program stay is. And as we said before, if the client is still enrolled in the program, when you click the exit assessment button, that basically starts the exit process, as we kind of talked about. However, if the client has already exited out of the program, this assessment button basically works the same as the entry. It'll only be there if the client still has optional exit assessments that haven't been completed during that specific process. Once they're all collected, those buttons will basically disappear. It's a good way to just backfill data for whatever reason your agency may have. The interim assessment button, this basically allows data to be collected in various situations, and it is available at all times. No matter if the program's open, closed, it'll always be there. And when you select that button, it'll basically take you to this intermediate screen that doesn't take you through the entire process. We basically allow you to pick and choose which one of these assessments you want to go and collect for the specific client. Basically, all you have to do is select which one you want, and depending on which ones you select, you go ahead and click this interim assessment button, and the system will take you through another little assessment loop, like a mini loop, and it'll only include the ones that you have selected. Now, with interim assessments, they're labeled, as we said before, either as during program enrollment, if it's during the program stay, or follow-up if it occurs after. The system basically, depending on what assessment date you enter in, because all these assessments, even though they're after the fact, still require you to enter a manually entered assessment date of when you collected the data, the system was smart enough to determine which one of these is, which one of these categories it should fall under. If it happens, you know, the date falls in between, you know, an entry and an exit date, it'll be labeled during program enrollment. However, if the date falls after the program exit, it'll automatically get labeled as follow-up. And please remember, for a lot of those APRs for those stayers, it's the during program enrollment assessment. That's what the system looks for when it's reporting those, you know, follow-up or, you know, stayer additional or annual assessments. So make sure the dates fall within the proper range depending on your program stays. Now we're going to talk a little bit about maintenance. Where does this data go? Since the assessments, as we see down here, and we kind of talked about in the assessment session, no program assessments are located within the program insertion services portion of the system. They're not there anymore. We got rid of the hated program-specific data element button. So even though that's the area where you need to collect and attach the assessment to the program, that's not where it is going to be in the system for you to view it, update it, kind of using the rules that we talked about. Every single one is going to be within one of these 6 tabs for each client. I want to make sure everybody is aware of that, and hopefully over time you'll get used to it and kind of kind of a nice place to have all the assessments for every client, no matter where or how it was collected. Now, within the assessment screen, depending on where it's collected, the system basically identifies what this data set is attached to. You know, is it just a general? Was it just, you know, attached to the client? Is it a program entry assessment, program exit assessment? If there's multiple program records, which one? The system basically labels it. Now, for current assessments, as well as if you load individual historic, basically it shows this nice little information bar that basically tells where it's from, so that you'll know, hey, I want to review this guy's health assessment. I'm not sure if I got it right. You'll be able to determine which one it is by looking at either this blue bar here or the actual historic assessments have these 4 sets of data. Now, if it's a general assessment, as you see here, that's all it'll say. It'll just say general assessment and have the assessment date of when it was collected. However, if it's associated to a program, it'll show not only, it'll show the program name it's associated to, the program entry date. Now, we had to put that in there in case the client was enrolled into the same program multiple times. Basically, you know which one of those program records it's attached to, the assessment date, as well as the type. You know, was it an entry, an exit, during enrollment, follow-up? All that information is there. And when you load it, it'll show the program, the site, as well as the entry, you know, the assessment type entry and the entry date within this label. So all the information that you need to look through and find old assessments. Then you can either, you know, update the assessments using the buttons to change them if you like, or just view them to make sure the information's there for reporting purposes. Okay, now we're going to finish up with some client management tools. Some of these have been in the system for a while. Some of them are new. Basic client lookup, pretty simple. We kind of talked about that. It has the same features as the new client lookup. Basically enter in the specific information. It also allows to look up by client ID. Now, that is both the agency ID as well as if you have a global client ID, you can enter it in and it'll pull up the global record. As well as on the caseload, we basically haven't changed any functionality with the caseload. Any client that you are directly working with will be attached to you and be on your caseload. All you have to do is basically click on them, and basically the system will load that client for you. Household lookup, pretty much the same process. When you click on that, it'll basically prompt you for almost kind of like a Google, Yahoo keyword search. You put in the keywords that you're looking for, select the household you want, and here it'll basically come up with all the current members, former members. They can be edited, changed, added, whatever you need to do with that household to make it configuration correct. Client data sheet, pretty much we didn't touch anything with this for our existing users. It's still located in a couple of places. The main place is within the main yellow section of each client, right next to the program and services. And the client data sheet was designed to provide users with a complete data snapshot from both a profile assessment and program standpoint. It contains a bunch of information. Now, the client data sheet is for data collected and shared in an agency. It has nothing to do with sharing settings or, you know, any kind of global broadcasting. It's still exactly as it was before, all data collected and viewed within an agency. Now, when you open it up, it's basically got the same information broken up into a couple different areas. Here on the program side, it highlights any health condition or educational points of interest. It's got a bunch of information about the client, household members. Also, it shows all programs that have been recorded for that client, their basic program stays. It also allows you to click on each program, and basically as you click on them, it expands, and if you click on them again, it also retracts or collapses the information. It has all kinds of information in a read-only fashion of services collected, assessments collected that can be viewed, and also this page can be printed out, either given to the client for records or just used for informational purposes. Now, one of the new things in the system is the global data sheet. This was designed to provide users with a complete set of shared data plus information from each contributing agency a client has visited in the system. Now, this global data sheet link is not going to be there for all clients, even clients that have shared data within your agency. And it will actually only be there if the client has visited another agency and has shared data outside your agency. We didn't want it to be something that, only contained the information that you entered. We wanted it kind of be something to say, hey, we have some extra data that, your agency didn't collect and it might be of interest to you. So that's why some clients may have it, some clients may not, and it's located basically right next to the client data sheet within the global or within the big yellow menu. And when you click on that data sheet, tons of information within this global data sheet that is provided. And it's broken up into a couple different areas. The main area is basically what we call the global data sheet, and it basically is a nice printable, formatted version of the client's global profile. So remember when we showed you when you click on the blue record and it brings up that big read-only profile? This is an exact mimic of it, and it basically will show information that's been shared throughout the system from multiple different agency sources. Now below that is what we call contributing clients. Now in this example here, this specific client has visited 3 different agencies and also has shared data at 3 different agencies, and it kind of shows basic main data personalized elements about that client. Some of it, if it's shared, it'll be in there. If it's not shared, it'll have a little not shared label on it. And here's basically shows the agency from which it came from. Now, these contributing client section actually is broken up into about three or four more sections. It shows data collected at that specific agency. Now, by clicking basically on any of these records, you will get an actual subset of all the data collected there. Now, it'll provide a little client data sheet that's not global, but it's information that was collected just at that agency, and that's part of the data set that contributes to the global client profile. Now, as you can see here, a whole bunch of information, and it'll basically help you, hey, how did the global profile get this data set? You can kind of go through the contributing, kind of figure out, oh, well, that's where it came from, or that's who contributed to it at what agency. Now, directly below that has 2 other sections, a household section as well as an agency information section. The household section basically shows, hey, what was the guy's household configuration at said agency. Now, if you click on him, he may have reported being served by with the same household configuration at all agencies, or it could differ. So it just provides additional information to users serving clients, for the first time, or even existing users of, different household sets they may have. Now, directly under that is that whatever agency they were served at, it kind of just shows a little agency tab. That's basically just information provided on that agency profile that provides, address information, contact information in case, you want to, you know that they visit that agency. Maybe you want to contact them to get additional information about the client, ask them about services, provide a plethora of other information, contact information about that. Now, the third, fourth area within each contributing client area is actually located directly below here, and it basically shows all the programs that client has been served within that particular agency. Now, it may be 0, it may be 5, it all depends on how many stays the client's had. Now, for a program record standpoint, and also a contributing client standpoint, they'll only view in this global data sheet if that client has signed a consent form that is either full or custom data sharing. That's at a minimum. If they have no data sharing in that agency, then basically we're not allowed to display any information throughout the system, especially on this data sheet. Now, the custom data sheet, no matter what sharing level they have, at least if they have some sharing, the system will at a minimum show the individual program record that they were enrolled in, which is consists of the agency, site, program, the type of program, as well as the entry and exit dates. Now, as with the client data sheet, where you can click on the individual program records and it opens up and it shows a whole bunch of service and assessment-based data, the global data sheet provides that as well, except the information shown is dependent on a couple of sharing levels within the system. Back when we talked about the the initial global data sharing policy, we had that one whole column, which was health, income, benefits, you know, has a whole bunch of settings related to what assessment data they can share. Depending on their individual settings, those are the global settings for what information is displayed on the global sheet. So for a particular client, if they've turned off income or a couple health elements, when you click on any program record, that specific information won't be shown because the client doesn't want it to be shared. Now, we have a second layer of sharing settings that we've kind of almost added as override settings within each individual program record. Now, while the entire data sharing policy provides the default sharings, and they can't be overturned, so, you know, if a client says, hey, I don't want to share services or I don't want to share income for all programs, there's no way to default, you know, share it within a program, but it does allow it to override to not share things that have been defaultly shared. So within each program record, directly below each button, there's basically two options. It says share assessments or share services, and it's related to what information you want to share or not share within that program record. And that was kind of designed for the fact that, you know, maybe a client does want to share health information for their programs, but maybe they got enrolled into a specific, like, mental health program, and maybe the caseworker or even the client decided, well, it might not be a good idea to share specific information from just that program stay, and that's the reason these extra flexible options were provided. Now, if the share assessment is turned off, that basically means despite any of the default settings, no assessment information will be shared in the record. That includes health, education, income and benefits, military information at all. None of it will be shown through the global data sheet. Now, if they unselect services, that means no services that were collected during that stay can be shown for the global data sheet just for this individual program. So hopefully this will provide a lot of flexibility to the different sharing levels and what information can be displayed just within the global data sheet. And just as a notice, we're going to kind of show you now, when you do click on a global data sheet, there's a couple different sections that it has. And each of them, you can see here the services, income sources, non-cash benefits. These basically are, depending on the program, what's been collected in the program will show each instance in a record. Now, depending on the sharing level of these, whether they're shared or not within, the policy or within the program record itself, these grids may or may not appear there. So if you go into a record and say, hey, there's no income and benefits within it, that means that, the client and the agency has turned it off for this specific record. Now, with the sharing, unlike the global profile that kind of uploads and downloads data, this is all done in real time. So if you go into a global data sheet from your agency and you notice from one of your programs, oh, it's showing income and benefits, I don't think that's a good idea. You can immediately go in and turn on and off program-based sharing, and the system will immediately enact it. So basically, the next time or anybody else that reloads that global data sheet across the system, it will, disappear or appear automatically in real time based on those settings. Now, the ones directly below that, while the income, benefit, and services are kind of based on an individual record basis, since health, education, and employment kind of have more in-depth data that we could fit into individual grids, they actually will have each assessment recorded here from that program that shows the type plus when it was collected. And when you click on it, it basically will fill out all the data elements that were shown. Now, if the whole health assessment is not shown, the whole grid will not be here. However, if just individual data elements within that assessment are turned off, it still will appear, but when you click on it, basically you'll see specific data elements within there that may or may not be turned off, and they'll be denoted here, as you can see, with the little not shared icon or label, and that can be either, and that is both basically derived from their data sharing, their global data sharing policy. So as you can see, this is a pretty in-depth tool. It does provide some, we're working on some printing options, so you can get a nice printout that you can either give to the client or keep for your agency records, and does provide a ton of information, not just from your agency, but from the entire system of where this client has visited and shared data. Okay, now we're going to talk about the duplicate client logic, go into this a little bit. We've actually enacted a pretty in-depth duplicate client system. Now, one of the main reasons we did that is because now with the ability to create partial intake profiles, people can come in and just add a name or just add a gender. There's situations that doesn't provide us with really enough information to do the check just when the client is created. That used to be in the past. And that's why we do ask that you enter in as much information as you had so we can catch it. But we had to enter in a supplemental collection that any time on a client profile, if a name, date of birth, social security number, or gender is either entered or changed, the system is actually going to go throughout your agency and try to locate a duplicate client with the same information. Now, if it doesn't find any, you're fine. You move on. You won't even know about it. However, if the system does find duplicates, depending on the level of matching that it finds with other clients in the agency, it'll perform one of a couple things. It'll either perform an exact match if a 100% match is found, and what it'll actually do is just perform an automatic merge right there in front of you. However, unless it's an automatic 100% match, which we'll go over each of these in the next couple slides, but it could either flag it as either a full match or an exact match, or as a possible match, and it'll actually flag the client as a duplicate and allow for additional client merging processes, and we'll talk about those in the next couple slides. Now, with the duplicate client merge, with an exact match, when a system knows that it's not only a duplicate, but an exact match, all 6 personalized data elements need to match exactly. That's name, date of birth, social security number, a full 9-digit social security number, gender, ethnicity, and race. So if the system finds 2 clients that all 6 of these match, we're pretty confident that they're the same exact person. It'll automatically merge them, give a little message on the screen saying, hey, this client's been merged, just to let you know what's happened. Now, with the whole merging process, for those agency managers that are here in attendance, they should be familiar with that client merge tool we have. As they know, the client merge isn't as simple as just putting 2 clients together. There's always any clients that are associated to households kind of need to be brought into the process, because if there's clients that are associated to multiple households and there's household members, just merging that client kind of leaves everything in limbo. So the system, when it notices there's a duplicate, not only looks at the individual clients, but it kind of looks outward and looks at each associated household member to try to find duplicate clients for them as well. Now, only in the process of, if not only the clients match that it finds, but all of their household members match as well, exactly with all 6 data elements, and the households are the exact in the actual household count, meaning there's got to be 3 in this household, 3 in that household. It's basically a perfect storm of match. The system will automatically merge all the clients and the household members associated with those clients. So it's probably not going to happen too often, but the system does have that in the system. Now, if an exact match isn't found, the system does notice, hey, there is a couple duplicate, there is duplicates here. It'll do one of 2 things. A full match is what we regard as a name and a full 9-digit social security number matching 1 or more clients in the system. If that is noticed, when you load the client profile, or as well as going to the program screen, the system will basically display this flagging message, basically say the system has flagged this client as a duplicate, and no further program data collection can occur until this is addressed. And the messages will basically have a little client merge tool that you're allowed to select, and it'll allow you to partake in the merging process. Now, with full matches, since we're pretty positive, with the Social Security matches that they are a duplicate, and we take, preventing and also taking care of duplicates very seriously, that will stop any client that's flagged this way will not be allowed to do any further program data collection. That means any existing program records you have, basically they're going to be locked out. You won't be able to enter them. And the new enrollment tool will be gone. So you definitely need to take care of any full matches that come around. And basically by selecting on that tool, it'll take you to a merge screen that allows you to take care of it. And we'll kind of talk about that merge process after we're done talking about the possible matches. When a possible match is found, that's basically when the system sees someone else with a name and either a matching date of birth or gender. It'll flag them as a possible duplicate, and you'll basically get this message here as well with the client merge tool. Allows you to either merge them or unflag them. And since it's just a possible, we're not sure, it doesn't inhibit any future data collection. Now, with this whole merging stuff, we also had to put in logic to make sure that any victim of domestic violence client data is kept private. If a domestic violence client is flagged, either as full or possible, and you as a user do not have access to that client, and it could be directly the client or any related household, since it is a household process, the system will basically display this message that says, hey, one or more clients flagged in the household has restricted access due to privacy concerns. Please contact your agency manager. And kind of like during the duplicate client check during client creation process, you'll need to take their client name, maybe their ID to your agency manager so they can either look into the issue, take care of it themselves, or put those clients on your caseload so that you can take care of it. Now, once you, if you get either of these messages, the full, which kind of forces you to deal with it, or the possible, which doesn't inhibit data collection, but we do recommend taking care of it as soon as possible, it'll actually take you to kind of like a mini merge tool. That what it'll do is instead of providing you with, a whole bunch of merge possibilities, it'll only show you with the clients that are relevant to the specific merge. Now, if it's a full merge, since we know it's a definite match, same Social Security numbers, the system will basically automatically check those clients for you. Basically say, hey, before you can take care of the problem, you definitely got to merge these people. Basically, at this point in time, you basically hit the display merge info button, and the system will basically load a client merge tool and actually walk you through the process of either merging that client, or if it's a household-based process, walk you through merging the entire households. And it could include 1, 2, 3, a numerous amount of sets of duplicate clients, depending of your data in your agency. Now, if it is a possible match, since we aren't sure, when you go there, it provides two options, and basically the merge link is not checked because we're not sure what process you want to take. Because with a lot of merge processes, we always need user input, especially with the possible merges, to let us know what it is. Now, if you look at them and go, yeah, these two are definitely duplicates, you can check the boxes and then go ahead and display merge info, and the system will load the merge as with the full, but you have that decision. Now, if you come in here and you realize, wait a minute, I guess it's flagged, they do have the same name, but these guys definitely are not duplicates. You can also, select the ones and then click the unflagged duplicate button, and that'll basically, and this is only for possible, it'll basically remove the flag from them, and the message will be gone from the system. But at least, you'll take care of the issue. Now, just to note that in certain situations, depending on your data, you could enter this merge tool, and there could be a combination of full and possibly matched people in there. So you'll need to, now all the full ones will be, automatically selected, but you'll need to use the decision on whether you want to include the possible matches, unflag them, kind of have to go through those steps to kind of intuitively figure out which ones are duplicates and which ones aren't. The client delete tool, we've had this in the system for a while. Not going to spend a lot of time on this. This has been available for all users in the systems. Clients should only be deleted and removed if they've been mistakenly entered or duplicated, not because they finished or exited your agency site or program. We want to keep all that data historically kept for reporting. I think everybody knows that and follows that. Now, once a client is deleted using this utility, they are permanently removed from the system. They're basically gone. There's not a very easy, there's no way to retrieve them, so please take care when using this tool. It's basically still available in everybody's tools section. Click on it. It basically asks you to search, and depending on the search, basically either brings up that client or asks you to pick the specific client you want to delete. Then it kind of goes through about a 4 or 5 step process of saying, hey, this is his profile. You sure? you know, this is the programs the guy has, are you sure? It really makes you go through those steps to confirm to delete that specific client. Okay, that about does it. We just got some documentation stuff we want to talk about. We have our own website. Everybody hopefully is fairly aware with, www.newpa.com/PAHMIS. Holds a whole bunch of resources from publications, documents, training library. Can also be found on the New PA Technical Assistance link down there. Hopefully, you know, we should, by the release time, it's not up there now, but by December 12th, we should have a whole bunch of new system documentation up there available, including the client consent form, system user agreements, as well as the feature guides we should have up there. The trainings we'll try to get there as soon as possible. And as I was talking about those feature guides, we've created, geez, probably 100, 150 pages of a bunch of different feature guides that kind of go over the newest features that have been released. They're kind of broken into each section: client delete entry series, or client data series, housing inventory series, communicative collaboration tools. Since these trainings are kind of limited, it's hard to pack everything in there. We definitely recommend everybody taking a look at them before the release or during the release as resources. Okay, that does it. We're finished with the training. If anybody has any questions about it, don't hesitate to contact myself or Steve at the help desk, either by phone or email. I know there's a lot of new stuff packed into this release. Pretty much every corner of the system was touched and transformed, hopefully for the better. Hopefully had some intuitive processes. So until everybody gets comfortable with it, the help desk is going to be wide open. Feel free to give us a call. We'll definitely work with you on, you know, different processes, where to find old data, how to enter in new data. That pretty much does it. We're going to open it up for questions. We got the collaborative training this afternoon at 2 o'clock in about an hour. That's anybody that wants to learn about the housing inventory, basically not the setup, but the actual interface for the daily bed management, as well as the collaborative tools. Go ahead and sign up on our website. And now, like I said, we'll go ahead and answer some questions and answers. Appreciate everybody's time, and please have a great day.